The story begins with Rowan Kessler, the eldest son of Duke Aldrich Kessler, born into the Valdrin Empire. Despite his noble blood, Rowan possessed no combat skills or offensive magic. His sole ability lay in alchemy, a craft his father considered entirely worthless. Treated as a disgrace for years, Rowan fled the ducal estate at age 13 to work as a lowly civil servant. There he used his alchemy to repair equipment and manage inventory in peace. That quiet life shattered when his father's soldiers forcibly dragged him back to the mansion. The ambitious Duke, desperate for a way to please the Emperor, decided to offer Rowan as a hostage to the demon territory. In the eyes of the Empire, Rowan represented nothing more than a disposable sacrifice. Both his father and the estate servants openly mocked him. They told him he was better off dead, tossing him into a locked carriage for a 10-day journey north. But during the trip, Rowan refused to give up. Using his alchemy, he secretly reshaped a stolen metal spoon into a lockpick, waiting for a chance to escape. Knowing the Imperial soldiers harbored a deep terror of demons, he planned to make his move the moment they reached the border. The carriage finally stopped at the edge of a dark forest. Nervous soldiers fired a signal arrow, drawing 4 massive minotaurs from the trees. While the Imperial escorts trembled and muttered insults at the savages, Rowan noticed a crucial detail. The minotaurs approached unarmed, raising their hands to show they meant no harm. A petite girl named Pym, dressed in a maid outfit, stepped forward to greet them. This silver-haired elf with pointed ears acted as an official guide sent by the Demon Lord. Far removed from the abusive humans Rowan knew, Pym and the Minotaurs proved incredibly polite, bowing deeply in welcome. The Imperial soldiers remained frozen in fear, fully convinced the demons planned a sudden attack. Disgusted by the stark cowardice and rudeness of his own people, Rowan stepped away from the guards and introduced himself with calm dignity. Pym smiled, genuinely touched by his kindness, and gently took his hand. For the first time in his life, Rowan experienced real respect, not from the Empire, but from the monsters he was taught to fear. Preparing to enter the demon territory, Rowan realized his miserable existence as a discarded hostage was over. His new life was just beginning. Rowan turned back to face the trembling Imperial captain, who desperately beckoned him to sign the official transfer documents. The captain looked visibly terrified, his face pale as he watched Rowan casually interact with Pym. The man simply could not fathom how Rowan dared to stand so close to an elf, fearing their magic and completely distrusting the new peace treaty. Rowan, however, made it clear he trusted these monsters more than a father who would casually throw away his own son. Hold up, smash that like button and subscribe for more hidden manga gems. Now, I dare you to drop a comment. Comment, "I'm loving it." I bet most of you won't even do it. Alright, let's get back to the story. Once Pym happily signed the papers, the hostage delivery became officially complete. Terrified by the sudden appearance of even more minotaurs, the Imperial soldiers shouted a hasty blessing for the treaty and sprinted away, leaving Rowan behind. Noticing Rowan showed no fear, Pym offered to have the minotaurs carry him through the dense forest, but he politely declined. Walking under the canopy, he realized he felt better than ever before. The air across the demon territory ran thick with a mysterious energy, unlike anything he felt back in the Empire. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his head, announcing he had absorbed enough dark magic to complete a set of 6 basic attributes. His basic alchemy skill instantly evolved into creation alchemy. This evolution granted him several new abilities, starting with material refining. This power allowed him to create and reshape physical substances directly from pure magic. Next came attribute addition, a skill to imbue ordinary items with specific magical powers. And finally, appraisal, letting him see the true nature and hidden stats of any object. He realized his past lack of combat skills likely happened because his body was waiting to unlock this high-level potential. As the group walked on, Pym accidentally tripped over a branch, snapping the golden chain of her precious blue stone pendant. Seeing her distress over the ruined mother's keepsake, Rowan quickly offered to fix it. Sitting by a nearby tree, he activated his new appraisal skill, identifying the item as a water spirit stone pendant. Channeling material refining, he manifested fresh metal straight from his own magic, seamlessly merging it with the broken links before adding a water attribute to strengthen the bond. Pym and the Minotaurs watched in total shock as the metal literally grew and repaired itself right in Rowan's hands. The swift repair amazed them, as not even master dwarf craftsmen could forge metal that fast. For the first time, Rowan felt the genuine pride of a master alchemist. The group eventually reached a black carriage marked with the Demon Lord's silver crest. Driving toward the capital, Rowan gazed out the window, discovering a world entirely different from the Empire's dark propaganda. Instead of a chaotic monster wasteland, he found a peaceful society where fishermen managed ships, mermaids swam in clear rivers, and beastmen tended flocks of sheep. Pym explained that the Demon Lord simply placed everyone where their talents proved most useful. When Rowan asked what happened to previous Imperial messengers, Pym confessed she heard they typically vanished or slipped away in secret. The horrifying truth dawned on Rowan. The Empire was sending people as sacrifices, and their desperate attempts to flee sparked the grim rumors of executions. Meeting his gaze with earnest eyes, Pym begged him to stay and aid the demon territory with his rare abilities. Rowan agreed to do his best, opting to keep his status as a discarded hostage a secret for the moment. Upon reaching the demon castle, guards escorted Rowan into a grand throne room to meet the demon lord, Sereth Vondar. Clad in a gold-threaded robe and a mask, two massive horns jutted from her head, radiating immense power. At her side stood Chancellor Corvin, a stern man with striking blue hair. Asked what value he could offer, Rowan declared himself an alchemist. This impressed Corvin, who mistakenly assumed the Empire possessed enough power to casually discard such rare experts. Sereth Vondar immediately granted Rowan a private workshop and a guest suite. She also provided full access to a massive warehouse packed with scrap hoarded by her predecessor. Strange artifacts dating all the way back to the era of hero summonings. Offering the scrap as raw material, she promised that if he forged anything useful, the demon territory would purchase his designs and look into mass production. For the first time, Rowan had found a place that genuinely valued his supposedly worthless skills. Taking the title to heart, Rowan officially accepted his new post as a demon territory alchemist. He felt inspired by the Demon Lord's willingness to learn from humanity rather than obsessing over raw strength. Unlike the rigid empire that discarded him, Sereth Vondar recognized his potential and offered him an entire warehouse of otherworldly hero relics. A brilliant plan formed in Rowan's mind. By harnessing his creation alchemy, he could forge advanced hero technology, aid the demons, and prove his worth to the very empire that abandoned him. Meanwhile, in the throne room, the Demon Lord and Corvin analyzed Rowan's true capabilities. Pym presented her repaired pendant, and Corvin's swift appraisal confirmed flawless restoration, a feat deemed completely impossible under their current technological limits. Kelp suspected Rowan was an imperial plant, meant to flaunt humanity's deep roster of experts, while Ruki remained deeply cautious. The Demon Lord ordered Pym to act as both Rowan's caretaker and his personal watchman, even though Pym openly admitted her elven intuition already trusted the boy completely. Alone in the warehouse, Rowan realized his evolved alchemy skills allowed him to seamlessly read the alien languages in the hero's books. Flipping through a mail-order catalog, he marveled at lifelike pictures of objects from the hero's world. A specific section on health goods caught his eye, detailing devices designed to boost physical recovery. Choosing his first project, he set out to recreate these healing tools and improve daily life in the demon territory. Pym soon arrived carrying fresh tea, immediately noticing the alchemist's intense enthusiasm. During their chat, Rowan discovered Pym suffered from a magical circulation defect that left her body perpetually freezing. This chronic chill crippled her spellcasting and forced her to wear thick fur socks all year round. Determined to ease her pain, Rowan pinpointed a specific foot bath in the catalog. The strange device promised to warm the feet and stimulate blood flow, prompting him to start working at once. Sending Pym to scrub a large metal bucket, he began scavenging the warehouse for essential components. Digging through the junk, he unearthed two broken magical shields, one fire, one wind. Channeling his creation alchemy, he softened the rigid shield metal into pliable clay. With gentle precision, he extracted the magic stones required to heat and vibrate the bathwater. Returning with the bucket, Pym watched Rowan casually mold solid steel with his bare hands. The sheer scale of his raw power left the elf completely stunned. Fusing the bucket and the softened shields, Rowan projected the image of the catalog's footbath into the alloy. Beneath his glowing hands, the twisted metal smoothed itself into a perfect square tub. He carefully embedded the salvaged fire and wind stones deep into the heavy base, channeling his mana to guarantee a steady, soothing heat alongside a gentle vibration. It struck him that, although he lacked the exact machinery of the hero's world, magical engineering offered a high-quality substitute, capable of the exact same results. As the alchemical glow faded, a brand new invention entered the world. The resulting footbath boasted incredible durability, drawing power from stones guaranteed to last an entire year, and a chassis built to survive for decades. Pym stared in disbelief as Rowan completed the complex task in under 10 minutes, though he simply brushed it off. He assumed his abilities were completely ordinary, though it clearly proved his father's past insults dead wrong. Eager to test the prototype, the pair hauled the device down to the castle basement for water. Chancellor Corvin trailed behind them, deeply curious to witness the human's first creation. Taking a seat on the stone stairs, Pym peeled off her thick fur socks and lowered her feet into the bubbling water. The relief hit instantly. The firestone maintained a perfect heat, while the windstone churned out massaging bubbles. A deep warmth flooded Pym's freezing body, allowing her internal magic to flow freely for the first time in her life. Corvin watched in absolute shock, explaining that Pym's human grandmother had passed down a mixed bloodline, a genetic quirk that crippled her magical circulation, defying every skilled healer in the demon territory until today. By infusing the water with fire and wind attributes, Rowan devised a method for Pym's body to absorb the missing energy. Overjoyed, Pym sprang to her feet and cast a wind spell, a feat she had never managed before. Caught up in the moment, she threw her arms around Rowan, promising through tears to repay him for changing her life. Corvin cut the celebration short, warning that keeping such a powerful item private risked shifting the entire balance of power. The demon offered to purchase the invention straight out with gold. Thrilled at the prospect of a reward, Rowan instead requested endless access to magic stones and warehouse materials. Politics held no interest for him. He just wanted to craft items, watch people use them, and eventually eclipse the technology of the ancient heroes. Corvin agreed to run this unlimited material plan past the Demon Lord. Later, within the throne room, Demon Lord Sereth listened in utter disbelief to the news of Pym's cure. Both she and Corvin realized Rowan possessed a mastery of magic and alchemy far beyond anything they knew. By curing a magical illness with simple health goods, the alchemist proved his immense worth. Meanwhile, deep within the Empire, panic rippled through the Duke's estate. The family dispatched a butler to the government office to check on the princess's magic sword. The office director admitted the weapon was nearly finished, purely because a former employee named Rowan had been repairing it in secret. This former worker was a genius who maintained the entire inventory, but the Duke's strict orders had erased Rowan's achievements from all official records, leaving the butler horrified. The useless son they sacrificed to the demons was the only person alive capable of restoring high-level imperial artifacts. Even the capital's finest alchemist had refused to touch the blade, declaring it beyond saving. Terrified of the Duke's wrath and the crushing weight of their mistake, the servant threatened the director to never breathe Rowan's name again. Snatching up the weapon, he rushed to a top-tier workshop, desperate for anyone else to finish the job. Yet the master artisans there simply bowed in reverence to the superior craftsmanship already etched into the steel. The head of the capital's largest forge took one look at the magic sword and refused the job outright. Fixing such a weapon required far more than simple blacksmithing. It demanded an alchemist capable of perfectly matching the metal's specific elemental attributes. Such high-level mastery had vanished after the era of the heroes. The old man practically worshipped the half-finished work resting on the blade. He called the repairs a miracle and begged to meet the craftsman responsible. Panic seized the butler, knowing the required genius was the very son his master had just discarded. Unable to bring Rowan back, he forced the old man to perform a cheap, surface-level patch so the sword looked presentable for the upcoming ceremony, an idea the alchemist hated but accepted on one condition. The butler had to sign a contract taking full responsibility when the sword inevitably shattered. Back at the demon castle, Rowan found the meals far superior to his empire rations. Utterly grateful for her restored magic, Pym tried spoon-feeding him, making the dinner noticeably awkward. He mentioned wanting to explore the territory and eventually secure a private room for his alchemy. Conducting experiments inside a warehouse packed with old books carried too much risk. Pym promised to secure permission, noting that the Demon Lord was surprisingly easygoing. After she left, Rowan scoured the hero's catalog for a workspace solution. A simple warehouse blueprint caught his eye, functioning much like a magical storage box. Tiny on the outside, it housed a massive pocket dimension within. Constructing it required earth, wind, and dark magic. But while he possessed the first two, his dark energy reserves remained far too low after a lifetime in the Empire. While pondering where to harvest more power, a massive wave of dark energy flooded his room from the corridor. His system devoured the influx instantly, fulfilling the warehouse requirements. Pulling the door open, he found Demon Lord Sereth standing in the hall. She had slipped by in secret to deliver her thanks for helping Pym. Unlike terrified messengers of the past, Rowan remained calm and respectful, sparking Sereth's curiosity. When asked about his plans, Rowan revealed the catalog and declared his intent to surpass the ancient hero's technology. His ultimate goal was transforming the demon territory into a better home than the Empire. Impressed by his bold claims, Sereth gave him the green light to begin construction immediately. Wasting no time, Rowan dragged out the metal lumps he had smelted from old shields and armor. The crucial component wasn't the outer metal shell, but the void inside forged by dark magic. Wielding his newfound power, he molded the metal into a doorway bridging a brand new dimension. Diving into the project, he mentally mapped out every detail of the catalog's simple warehouse. Limited materials forced him to scale down the design, yet his focus remained absolute. Pym and Demon Lord Sereth watched in utter silence, with Pym whispering that once Rowan begins a project, his fierce concentration becomes unstoppable. Rowan visualized the structure's raw texture, its heavy weight, and adjusting the temperature. Using his creation alchemy, he projected a glowing magical blueprint over the gathered metal scraps. Infusing the metal with dark magic for spatial expansion and earth magic for stability, he forged the warehouse. The finished structure was a metal box barely 4 feet tall, yet its properties defied belief. It housed a separate pocket dimension with breathable air and a preservation aura that stopped food and water from spoiling. The design even absorbed ambient dark magic automatically, making it self-sustaining for an entire century. Rowan invited Pym to step inside, and the sight left them both speechless. Beyond the tiny entrance stretched a massive hall, as large as a duke's estate. Thrilled by the discovery, Pym sprinted across the vast empty floor. She quickly realized no treasure in the demon castle could rival this creation. Rowan confessed his ultimate goal: to outstrip the technology of the ancient heroes who founded the Empire. He intended to prove his worth by forging a world far better than the one that cast him out. Moved by his kindness and his earlier help with her magic circulation, Pym swore to support his alchemy in any way she could. Sereth's voice echoing from outside cut their conversation short. Inside this separate dimension, they hadn't heard her knocking. Curious and slightly suspicious of a foreign alchemist forging a pocket realm inside her castle, she demanded to see the interior for herself. Rowan stepped aside to let her in, but the moment the Demon Lord crossed the threshold, the warehouse's automatic organization system triggered. Because Sereth wore a high-tier magical mask and heavy robes, the system tagged them as rare inventory, instantly stripping them away for proper storage. The sudden confiscation exposed Sereth's true form. Instead of a terrifying monster, she was a beautiful, petite blonde girl with dark red eyes. Panic erupted as Sereth scrambled to cover her face. Once she finally calmed down, she revealed the truth behind her disguise. Since the Empire respected only raw power, she relied on enchanted gear to project an intimidating aura, keeping her enemies at bay and her people united. Her small stature and stunted physical growth left her deeply insecure. She terrified that her subjects would never respect a weak-looking girl as their ruler. Rowan, however, found himself genuinely moved by her true appearance. He assured her that her natural beauty completely eclipsed any functional perfection he could craft through alchemy. Then he laid bare his own secret. Rather than a prestigious guest sent by the Empire, he was a discarded hostage, a sacrifice his own father deemed worthless for lacking combat power. Sharing their vulnerabilities forged a sudden bond between the useless alchemist and the weak demon lord. Both had suffered under the judgment of a world that prized only raw physical might. Hearing that Rowan arrived as a mere sacrifice left Pym completely stunned. She struggled to understand why he would expose this weakness instead of leveraging the Empire's name to make demands. Rowan refused to hide behind a lie, asking them to keep his status quiet so the demon territory wouldn't treat him differently. In return, he swore to protect the secret of Sereth's true identity. Sereth burst out laughing, finding it absurd that he would trade his greatest secret just to guard hers. Yet his honesty deeply touched her. Since he trusted her with the truth, she declared she would place her trust in him as well. She immediately ordered Pym to spread the rumor that Rowan was a prestigious guest and her personal alchemist. This cover story ensured no one would suspect he was just a discarded hostage. Sereth claimed Rowan's magical warehouse as their designated exception zone. Inside this private sanctuary, she could remove her mask and they could all speak freely, stripping away titles and pretenses. Taking Rowan's hand, she solemnly promised to stand as his ally. Pym suggested carving out a corner of the warehouse for a cozy tea party spot to relax together. Rowan agreed, realizing his inventions held the most value when they brought joy to his friends. Later that night, Chancellor Corvin was floored to learn Rowan had recreated the storage box, a legendary feat ancient heroes used to carry infinite items. Corvin panicked, fearing this power would shatter the world's balance. But Sereth calmed him by mentioning Rowan's promise to craft storage boxes for her and Pym. The Chancellor quickly realized that with Rowan present, the entire concept of rare items would change forever. To lock his talents within the demon territory, Corvin proposed a political marriage between Rowan and Pym. He even suggested using a future child as a hostage, an idea Sareth shut down immediately. Knowing his painful history as a discarded son, she flatly refused to let anyone use him or his future family as pawns. Beneath her mask, the mere thought of Rowan marrying someone else left her flustered, though she carefully hid the reaction from Corbin. Meanwhile, back in the warehouse, Pim helped Rowan arrange the new tea party area. As they moved furniture, Pim opened up about Sareth's hidden past. A strict father who valued raw power above all else had raised the Demon Lord. Cursed with a small, weak appearance, she felt forced to hide behind a mask just to command basic respect. The story made Rowan realize just how similar they were, both judged by parents who cared only for combat strength. Pim then warned Rowan about the aggressive military faction brewing within the demon territory. She specifically pointed out General Falk, a massive descendant of flame giants entirely obsessed with physical dominance. She strongly advised staying away from those who believed might makes right, knowing they would never understand the true value of his alchemy. As the night came to a close, Pim insisted Rowan drop the formal language. Being the Demon Lord's personal alchemist meant he outranked almost everyone in the castle, she explained. After some back and forth, Rowan agreed to just call her Pim. For the first time, he felt a profound sense of belonging, a peace he never found in the cutthroat, power-hungry empire. Pim then swore her loyalty and retired for the night. Left alone, Rowan reflected on his first day in demon territory. He uncovered ancient books, forged high-level magic items, and finally felt at home. Right then, he resolved to use his alchemy to elevate this land far beyond the Empire's reach. His goal was to surpass even the legendary hero's technology. Meanwhile, a lavish royal party was underway back in the Valdrin Empire. Duke Bargareges soaked up the attention of the surrounding nobles. He boasted loudly about sacrificing his own son for the good of the nation. The Duke openly mocked Rowan as a useless disgrace, completely ignoring his butler's frantic attempts to warn him. Princess Rosalind's sudden arrival cut the Duke's arrogance short. Instead of offering a greeting, the princess ordered her guards to throw him out, branding him a threat to her life. The magic sword his house supposedly repaired had shattered during a monster hunt, nearly getting her killed. She laid out the truth. The Duke's butler signed a contract admitting they only performed a superficial, fake repair because they lacked the skill to truly fix it. Yet, a small portion of the blade had been flawlessly restored by someone else, and that single section saved her life. She demanded the name of the genius who did the real work, intending to take them into her service. Fear paralyzed the Duke. The genius she sought was the very son he had just banished to die. Following this public humiliation, the crown banned the Duke from the palace. In a blind rage, he hurled his butler into prison to take the fall. The next morning in demon territory, Pim served Rowan a breakfast identical to the Demon Lord's own meals. Getting treated like royalty felt awkward, especially compared to surviving on 3-day-old bread back in the Empire. Pim explained that everyone in the castle was eager to learn from him, since the demon territory heavily focused on self-improvement after their historical defeats by human heroes. Guiding him through the castle, Pim stopped them before a statue of the first Demon Lord. Rowan's creation Alchemy immediately recognized the sword in the statue's hands as a fake. Pim confirmed the original legendary blade had been lost ages ago. Rowan quietly vowed to either track it down or forge an even better weapon for rookies. She imagined something unique, like a whip sword capable of channeling her dark magic. A massive, muscular man with red hair like flickering flames suddenly interrupted their peaceful tour. This was General Falk, the military faction leader Pim had warned him about. Standing over 2 meters tall, the giant radiated heat and glared down at Rowan with obvious doubt. He came to see if this prestigious imperial guest lived up to the hype, or if he was just another frail human. Rowan offered a polite introduction, but General Falk remained unimpressed, dismissing Rowan as a weak desk worker rather than a true warrior. A figure completely encased in full-plate armor stood silently beside the general. This was Falk's daughter Ilsa. Realizing Rowan possessed no combat skills, the general mocked him, claiming he had hoped for a duel between Rowan and Ilsa to test her strength. Throughout the exchange, Ilsa Brandt vented small flames as she struggled to contain her emotions. Pim quickly stepped in, scolding the giant for disrespecting an honored guest of the Demon Lord. Brushing off the lecture, Falk questioned how such a feeble alchemist could possibly aid their ruler. Rowan calmly replied that he could reinforce Ilsa's armor. He noticed her gear relied on double earth attributes for fire resistance, but it was slowly warping and degrading from the sheer heat of her flames. Offended by the idea of a weak human touching his daughter's gear, the general stormed off with Ilsa in tow. After finishing the castle tour later that day, Rowan headed to the bathhouse to unwind. Seeing no occupied sign, he walked into the resting area and spotted Ilsa's armor on the floor near an open boiler room door. Inside, an unarmored Ilsa danced playfully with 3 small, fire-breathing salamanders. She channeled her own fire to help them boil water for the castle baths. As a descendant of the flame giant Ifrit, her body generates intense heat that incinerates normal clothing, forcing her to wear flame-resistant armor. Spotting Rowan, Ilsa panicked and accidentally unleashed a blast of fire right at him. Rowan quickly deployed a simple warehouse artifact to absorb and trap the flames, sparing himself from the blast. Distraught, Ilsa ducked behind the heavy boiler room door, terrified of hurting a guest and getting the salamanders punished by her father for her own lack of control. Rowan managed to calm her down, finally understanding the general's fierce protectiveness. Fixing her armor meant taking away the only garment she could safely wear. Once Ilsa strapped her armor back on, the two sat together in the resting area. The silence hung awkwardly, but Ilsa, Magnus, took the blame, admitting she forgot to hang the occupied sign while helping the spirits. Rowan noticed the salamanders acting protective of her, and realized that beneath the terrifying armor, Ilsa was just a kind-hearted girl struggling to manage a power she could not fully control. Rowan apologized for catching Ilsa without her armor, then quickly steered the conversation toward her magic. His appraisal skill revealed that the suit was breaking down because it failed to contain her intense heat. Ilsa removed her helmet, exposing topaz eyes and hair that flickered like open flame. She explained that as a descendant of the flame giant Ifrit, she generates immense heat that constantly threatens to overwhelm her. Whenever her emotions spike, raw fire erupts from her body, incinerating normal clothes and burning anyone standing too close. That drove her to hide away in the boiler room with the salamanders. Those fire spirits remained her only friends, immune to her scorching touch. Rowan promised to find a solution, insisting his duty as the Demon Lord's alchemist meant helping every citizen. For immediate relief, he handed her the miniature storage warehouse he crafted earlier. He demonstrated how to siphon her surging flames into the device, using it as a temporary safety valve. Moved by his kindness, Ilsa accepted the gift. She mentioned she only needed to hold out for 5 more years until her powers naturally stabilized at age 20. Back in his room, Rowan scoured his mail-order catalog for a permanent cure. Pim arrived and, witnessing his dedication, confessed that she and Ilsa were once childhood friends. That bond shattered when Ilsa accidentally burned Pim's arm during her magical awakening. Though the wound healed, crushing guilt forced Ilsa to pull away and hide inside her heavy armor. Rowan discovered the perfect item, a health pendant based on the hero world's concept of chi and the 5 elements. The catalog explained that physical illness or intense body heat stems from a severe elemental imbalance. Replicating this tool would drain Ilsa's overflowing fire magic and instantly convert it into the remaining 4 elements. Using creative alchemy, Rowan started the grueling process of mimicking the pendant's complex design, which featured the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, black tortoise, and Kirin. As he worked, the system granted him 5 attribute manipulation, unlocking the hero world's rare wood and metal affinities. He successfully forged the silver pendant and sealed a magic conversion mechanism inside. The finished masterpiece boasted high rarity, designed to fracture the wearer's magic into 5 equal shares. This relic finally gave Ilsa a chance at a normal life, where her touch brought no destruction. The health promotion pendant worked flawlessly. Instead of venting her fire magic outward, it channeled the energy into the other 4 elements: wood, earth, metal, and water. This artifact did far more than suppress the flames. It recycled the raw magic to greatly boost her health, vitality, and physical strength. Thrilled by the results, Pim suggested building giant versions of these statues to balance the entire demon territory. Rowan knew such a massive project would demand the Demon Lord's express permission first. Meanwhile, General Falk prepared to depart the castle. He offered a solemn apology to his daughter Ilsa for her uncontrollable flames, blaming himself for passing down the volatile blood of the flame giant Ifrit. His unit was marching to a southern mine to slaughter monsters under a new treaty with the Empire. He expected Ilsa to unleash her destructive fire to prove her ultimate worth as a warrior, believing that hurting others remained the only valid use for her immense power. Ilsa nodded obediently, though she secretly longed for a much gentler life. Her thoughts drifted to Rowan, the only person unafraid of her, who even called her flames beautiful. The following evening, Rowan met Ilsa at the bathhouse rest area for their final session. Pim joined them with a spare maid outfit in hand, and Ilsa stared in absolute shock as Rowan presented the finished pendant. She dreaded trying on normal clothes, terrified she would incinerate the fabric and severely disappoint Rowan, especially since her soaring emotions constantly threatened to spark an inferno. Rowan firmly reassured her that as the territory's lead alchemist, he would stay right by her side, repairing the item as many times as it took until it worked perfectly. Deeply moved, Ilsa retreated into the boiler room with Pym to change. The moment she slipped on the pendant and the maid outfit, the magic locked into place. The system confirmed her overflowing fire magic was perfectly balanced and contained. Stepping back into the room, she looked like a completely different person. Wearing the crisp white apron and headdress, she looked remarkably cute. And for the very first time, her flickering red hair cast no dangerous heat. The transformation proved so potent that when Ilsa grew flustered and her magic violently surged, the pendant instantly converted the wild energy into raw physical stats. She accidentally leaped so high she practically floated toward the ceiling. She marveled at how light her body felt, and how her skin glowed healthier than ever. Years of trauma over accidentally burning Pym finally began to melt away. Pym wrapped her in a tight hug, proving once and for all that Ilsa posed no danger to the people she loved. Tears of joy streamed down Ilsa's face as she shed the heavy armor that had been her prison. Through her tears, she thanked Rowan for giving her a chance at a normal life. Pym urged Rowan to embrace the girl in celebration of her newfound freedom, and though it felt a bit awkward since Ilsa wore nothing beneath her maid uniform, Rowan agreed. Just before they embraced, General Falk's booming voice echoed down the hallway and broke the moment. Ilsa quickly brought her father up to speed, explaining how Rowan's alchemy suppressed her dangerous flames, so she could finally wear normal clothes. Overwhelmed with guilt over his earlier rudeness, the general dropped into a deep bow, repeatedly slamming his forehead against the floor. The man even tried to gouge his own eyes out as punishment for misjudging Rowan's character, until Ilsa and Rowan physically restrained him. Falk admitted his harshness stemmed from a desire to see Ilsa prove her strength as a warrior and gain confidence. Seeing her happy and safe changed everything, prompting him to pledge absolute loyalty to the alchemist. To reward Rowan for saving his daughter, the general granted him full access to the territory's mines to harvest rare materials like meteoric iron. Rowan finished adjusting Ilsa's pendant, adding a spare alongside a user support feature he discovered in the Hero World's manual. Brimming with gratitude, Ilsa swore to dedicate her life to supporting Rowan's dreams. Later that evening, Ilsa and Pym shared a quiet moment out on the castle balcony. The newly freed girl thanked Pym for her support, confessing her desire to study hard and eventually serve as Rowan's second attendant. She then handed Pym a mysterious small black stone, entirely resistant to extreme heat, asking her to pass it along to Rowan as an alchemy ingredient. During their chat, Pym teased the other girl about her lingering embarrassment, pointing out that Rowan had seen quite a bit of her during their accidental bathhouse encounter. While Ilsa turned bright red, Pym jokingly wondered if she, serving as Rowan's loyal maid, should also accidentally expose herself to keep their master happy. Their conversation shifted as Ilsa revealed she had been practicing fire control down in the boiler room alongside the salamanders. They promised to keep this secret strictly between themselves and Rowan. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Flame General Falk knelt before Demon Lord Sereth and Chancellor Corvin. In a shocking move, the commander swore an absolute oath of allegiance in the name of the primordial flame, a sacred Ifrit vow, untouched since the era of the first Demon Lord. Falk explained this sudden change of heart by declaring Rowan his benefactor, admitting he initially tried to kidnap the boy before Ilsa stepped in to stop him. He marveled aloud at how alchemy had completely transformed his daughter. Her new strength allowed her to effortlessly restrain and lift her own father overhead, leaving Sereth stunned. The Demon Lord realized Rowan hadn't just suppressed Ilsa's flames. He had converted that raw energy into physical power rivaling a legendary hero. Falk offered his resignation as punishment for his disrespect, but Sereth had a better plan in mind. Knowing Rowan wouldn't want the general punished, she instead confiscated a tract of Falk's land near the southern mines to build Rowan a private mansion and a world-class workshop. Overjoyed by the outcome, Falk happily agreed to fund the construction, viewing it as the perfect way to repay his debt. Before departing, the general hinted that Agnes Vadathor might carry a deep romantic meaning within their culture, a remark that left Sereth curious and Corvin slightly panicked. The following day, Ilsa and the general set off for their home territory. Now comfortably dressed in a normal gown lent by Pym, Ilsa eagerly looked forward to Rowan visiting her new home soon. Back in the workshop, Rowan examined the mysterious black stone Ilsa left behind. Applying his alchemy skills, he identified the object as an iron meteorite from outer space. This discovery unlocked a brand new space attribute for his crafting, an element completely unheard of within the Empire. Thrilled by the endless possibilities, Rowan began organizing the messy warehouse next to his room, a space he considered a treasure trove of junk. Sifting through piles of old books, he uncovered a historical record written by the first Demon Lord, detailing the territory and its people. The ancient texts absorbed his attention so thoroughly that he nearly lost track of time. He was scheduled to meet Sereth and Pym for a 3 o'clock tea party, but as he rushed to finish cleaning, a voice called out and interrupted the work. Rowan was still buried in the first Demon Lord's book when Pym and Sereth arrived for their tea. Sereth had ditched her usual mask and heavy robes for a stylish black outfit tied with ribbons, looking every bit like a normal teenage girl. When Rowan complimented the look, she grew flustered and demanded he drop the royal titles, insisting he call her Sereth as a sign of their friendship. While finishing his warehouse cleanup, Rowan stumbled upon a short black magic sword hidden inside a wooden box. His appraisal skill identified the weapon as a discarded prototype from a failed project to recreate the legendary magic sword. The dull blade offered nothing more than a basic strength-boosting effect, so Sereth officially gifted it to him. And then, Rowan immediately proposed a new project, using alchemy to reforge the replica into a masterpiece worthy of her true face in battle. Though a touched Sereth told him not to rush. She explained that her upcoming monster subjugation mission required no frontline combat swords. Instead, she desperately needed a weapon that would allow her soldiers to strike safely from a long distance. Taking this challenge to heart, Rowan immediately began scouring his mail-order catalog for a solution. Over tea, the trio also drafted blueprints for Rowan's new home and workshop, which General Falk had offered to build, leaving Pym and Sereth to take charge of designing the living quarters. He added a massive bathroom and a spacious double bedroom. Pym insisted the extra space was necessary for tending to Rowan. Blushing, she pointed out he would need help washing up after a long day of alchemy. The next day, Rowan found the perfect item in his catalog, a laser pointer doubling as a sight. In the hero's world, soldiers use this tool to mark targets, boosting the accuracy and range of weapons like crossbows 5-fold. Rowan realized this was exactly what the demon forces needed to snipe monsters from a safe distance. Applying his creative alchemy, he fused light and dark magic stones. Dark magic compressed the light into a tight beam, while wind attributes carried it further, yielding a 60-centimeter metal cylinder. This high-rarity pointer featured a built-in safety mechanism, preventing it from targeting humans or demons. Eager to test the invention, the alchemist and Pym headed for the castle's magic training ground. They arrived to find a mixed group of elf and minotaur soldiers, locked in a fierce argument over how to handle the Vaskar monsters without endangering their mages. Stepping forward, Rowan prepared to show them how his creation could solve their tactical nightmare. Rowan and Pym walked onto the castle's magic training ground, where a Minotaur commander and an elf mage stood locked in a dispute. The two factions clashed over the upcoming Vaskar mission. Vanguard fighters pushed for a fast assault, while the mages feared getting surrounded and demanded to maintain a safe distance. Rowan noticed that unlike the Empire's rigid hierarchy, the demon territory allowed its soldiers to openly debate battle strategy. Securing permission to use the facility, Rowan tested his new laser pointer. He shouldered the device, and a bright red dot struck a distant stone target, framed by a black border for clear visibility. He instructed Pym to fire an ice spell at the mark. To her shock, every icicle arrow nailed the exact center. This pinpoint accuracy held even when they backed up to over 3 times the normal magic range. The device, Rowan realized, served as far more than a simple visual aid. That beam of light and dark magic generated a physical current, dragging spells directly toward the mark. Pym stood stunned, realizing this technology made long-distance combat incredibly safe. Nearby soldiers dropped their argument to watch in dead silence, shocked to see a maid who had previously struggled with spells sniping targets at impossible distances. Seeing their tactical problems solved, the commander sprinted for the Chancellor's office to demand approval for Rowan's invention. Meanwhile, down in General Falk's southern territory, a corrupt Imperial messenger Margrave Holt arrived to finalize a mining treaty. The Demon Lord had agreed to share silver from a new mine, trading ore for the Empire's help clearing out monsters. Holt immediately tried bribing Falk, suggesting they extend the contract to 4 years and pocket the extra silver. The envoy planned to frame Rowan for the embezzlement, claiming the alchemist forged documents to steal the ore. He assumed Falk would agree, knowing the Empire viewed Rowan as a worthless sacrifice. The foolish noble never realized Falk now considered Rowan a hero and a close friend who saved his daughter. Exploding in rage, Falk erupted in flames, instantly reducing the meeting table to ash. He screamed at the terrified Margrave, declaring Rowan his benefactor and a potential husband for his daughter, Ilsa. Falk scrapped the local negotiations entirely, vowing to report the empire's corruption directly to the emperor. The general made it clear the demon territory would no longer deal with lowly nobles trying to make Rowan a scapegoat. Terrified by the general's power and his ruined political career, Holt watched Falk shatter the reinforced windows, signaling the meeting, and their alliance were officially over. Outside the window, General Falk's voice boomed over his gathered soldiers. The commander, publicly declared the negotiations failed because Margrave Holt dared to insult his friend Rowan. Ordering the Margrave to leave immediately, Falk refused to bow to anyone disrespecting his guest. Terrified and confused by how much the general valued the alchemist, the Margrave and his men scrambled in retreat toward the Empire. Ilsa, Falk's daughter, burst into the room. Learning the Imperial messenger had insulted Rowan, her protective pendant flared up as she prepared to chase the men down and burn them alive. However, Falk stopped her. If Rowan learned the Empire truly viewed him as a disposable sacrifice, Falk explained, it would shatter his heart. Father and daughter agreed to keep the insult a secret to protect Rowan's feelings. Falk even suggested Ilsa become Rowan's personal servant just to stay close to him. Following the incident, Falk dispatched a full report to Demon Lord Sereth, explaining his reasons for breaking off the talks. A few days later, Sereth replied with her full support. Surprisingly, she had also received a letter directly from the Emperor. The monarch claimed the Margrave's bribe attempt was completely unauthorized, offering to hunt the monsters for free as an apology. To guarantee their goodwill, the Empire promised to send the third princess, Rosalind, to assist. To project the demon territory's true strength, Sereth decided to lead the mission herself. This marked her first official conquest, and a thrilled Falk immediately began preparing his troops for her arrival. Back in the Empire, Duke Bargareges spiraled into a panic. He had already bragged to the Emperor that the silver mine deal was an absolute guarantee. The Duke was stunned to learn the general had rejected the deal specifically to protect Rowan. The nobleman could not comprehend why a powerful demon general would care about his useless son. His situation plummeted from bad to worse when Draven, the Minister of Military Affairs, stormed into his office with soldiers. Draven revealed he had spies in the Margrave's camp and knew everything, including the plot to frame Rowan. The minister was disgusted, not by the cruelty, but by the sheer stupidity of offending a powerful general, bringing immediate and brutal consequences. Draven declared Rowan a completely taboo subject. This boy, the Duke deemed useless, had secured the favor of the demon territory's highest leaders in mere days. For embarrassing the Empire, the man was stripped of his title, demoted to a mere count, and forced to fund the entire monster expedition out of his own pocket. Barely escaping execution, the former Duke was conscripted as a low-level captain of 10 men, and shipped off to a deadly southern conflict. The once mighty Reguis family was completely ruined. Meanwhile, at the Demon Castle, Lord Sereth and Chancellor Corvin reviewed the incoming letters. Ruki noted how swiftly the Emperor had dispatched an apology. They realized the Empire was clearly monitoring its own corrupt officials. Reading Falk's report for the 5th time, Sereth fixated on the part where the Empire tried offering Rowan as a scapegoat. Seeing how severely his own people mistreated him only hardened her resolve to protect the boy. Her hands trembled as she finished General Falk's reports. Horror washed over her upon learning that Rowan's own father had planned to toss his son away as a disposable scapegoat to mask a botched bribery attempt. Realizing the depths of Rowan's abuse in the Empire made her blood boil. But was she forced down her rage to maintain her dignity as the Demon Lord? Later, Sereth summoned Chancellor Corvin to discuss the matter. They agreed that despite the Empire's disgusting corruption, Rowan's status in the demon territory remained secure. He was an essential friend and a brilliant alchemist. However, while Raisingo wanted to hide the Duke's betrayal to protect Rowan's feelings, Corvin argued the boy needed the truth to avoid future manipulation. Sereth decided she would break the news personally during their next tea party. Inside Rowan's room, the mood stayed light as he and Pym demonstrated their successful laser point. Sereth tried acting natural, yet the heavy news weighed her down. Looking at Rowan's bright smile, she realized the cruelty of revealing his father's betrayal in such a joyful setting. When she finally brought up the incident at the silver mine, her voice cracked. Unable to hold back her emotions, tears spilled down her face. She broke into sobs as she confessed that his father tried framing him for a crime that carried the death penalty. Startled to see the Demon Lord crying for his sake, Rowan absorbed the news with eerie calm. He gently comforted Sereth, admitting that this sounded exactly like something his father would do. In the Empire, he explained, martial strength dictated absolutely everything. A common thief had murdered his grandfather, a legendary swordmaster, in a drunken stupor, teaching Rowan that raw strength was unreliable. Choosing alchemy over combat meant his father viewed him as nothing more than a failed tool. Still thoroughly emotional, Sareth refused to let go of Rowan's hand. She confessed her fear that he would feel entirely alone after learning his family had discarded him. She even wished they could stay together until they fell asleep, but Pym quickly pointed out that castle rules forbade the demon lord from keeping a male guest overnight. To solve this dilemma, Rowan flipped through his mail order catalog and found the latest model body pillow, explaining it was no ordinary cushion. The item was woven from a magical material capable of altering its shape. He planned to adapt the core concepts of shape-shifting magic. Drawing on a legendary hero who molded magic into any form, he would customize these pillows. By infusing the fabric with their personal energy, they could craft a pillow that felt exactly like holding hands with each other. This would allow them to feel perfectly connected even while sleeping in separate rooms. Rowan immediately set to work, utilizing bean shells and magic stones provided by Sareth and Pym. Refining the materials through alchemy, he wove a special cloth that shifted shape based on a person's magic and thoughts. To improve the design, he infused water and wind elements so the pillow remained soft, cool, and breathable. Testing the invention, Pym grabbed the pillow cover and channeled her magic into the fabric. Slipping the cover over the pillow transformed it into a flawless physical copy of her. Sareth and Pym watched in awe. Yet Rowan bluntly labeled his creation a failure. He explained that even though it perfectly mirrored Pym's appearance, it utterly failed to capture her true beauty or the daily kindness she showed him. A long rant praising her myriad charms followed, turning Pym so bashful she refused to look up. Following the test, Rowan crafted a version of the pillow bearing his own likeness for Sareth. He explained that because the enchanted pillow shared his senses, Sareth could grip its hand and he would feel the touch in his own room, keeping them connected while they slept apart. That night, Pym smuggled the pillow cover into Sareth's room. Since the Demon Lord's floor was strictly off-limits to men, this offered the only way for Sareth to feel close to him. Slipping the cover onto the pillow transformed it into a sleeping version of Rowan. Despite feeling a little embarrassed, Sareth rejoiced that Rowan had gone to such lengths just to grant her wish. The two girls tucked the pillow into bed, ready to spend the night holding Rowan's hand. Sareth and Pym settled into the Demon Lord's bedroom alongside the Rowan body pillow. A major problem quickly emerged. Gripping the pillow's hand felt so warm and real that excitement kept them awake. Needing a distraction, Sareth brought up recent news from the Empire. She confirmed the Duke and the Margrave lost their positions for trying to frame Rowan, making him effectively untouchable now that the Empire realized how much the demon territory valued him. Pym mentioned that Rowan used his mother's surname, Kanan, whenever he worked away from home. Loving the name, Sareth decided they should call him that whenever they were alone together. Just before drifting off, both girls traced the name Rowan Ambrose onto the palms of the body pillow. By the next morning, the pillow had reverted to its normal shape. Visiting Rowan later that day, Sareth greeted him as Rowan Ambrose, but the alchemist didn't seem surprised. He explained a strange dream had plagued him all night, full of people writing that name onto his hands. Guessing they had used the pillow to manipulate his senses, he demanded a full report to help improve his alchemy. Flustered, Sareth shouted that what girls do in bed remained a maiden's secret, ordering him to drop the subject. Later in the throne room, Rowan delivered a formal presentation to Sareth, Chancellor Corvin, and the military leaders. He unveiled a brand new material discovered while crafting the pillow, magic cloth. By melting magic stones into fabric, he forged 4 types of cloth based on the primary elements. The brown earth cloth was extremely strong, fire-resistant, and impossible to tear. The blue water cloth proved highly flexible and form-fitting, perfect for swimming or active wear. The red fire cloth offered incredible heat insulation to keep the wearer warm in freezing weather. Finally, the green wind cloth was breathable and quick-drying, keeping the wearer cool in extreme heat. Thrilled officers realized these fabrics would completely revolutionize both their armor and their daily lives. Sareth decided to test the wind cloth on the soldiers during the upcoming volcano mission to combat the heat. When she asked about light and dark versions, Rowan reluctantly brought out his cloaks. The dark cloth absorbed all light to become pitch black, something Rowan claimed was only useful for blackout curtains or taking naps. The light cloth acted even stranger, turning 80% transparent the moment magic struck it. Rowan considered this a complete failure, since it wasn't perfectly invisible, But the sight of a semi-transparent cloak left the entire room stunned by the tactical potential of his mistake. He then displayed a dual-attribute magic cloth that fused light and dark together. This ruined experiment randomly turned either pitch black or totally transparent whenever magic touched it. Thinking it entirely useless, he joked about gifting the fabric to his enemies so their clothes would suddenly vanish. Agreeing it lacked practical use for now, Sareth and the Chancellor still praised his other fabrics. Sareth ordered the army to equip the wind cloth for the mission and commanded Rowan to take a break. She suggested he tour General Falk's territory to scout a location for his new workshop and soak in the local hot springs. Before his departure, Pym briefed Rowan on their target, Vaskar. This massive, metal-plated spider commanded an endless swarm of subordinates. Its sticky threads acted as its deadliest weapon, easily trapping warriors and silencing mages. Rowan learned the mission served as a joint operation with the Empire, and the third princess, Rosalind, would join them to test her legendary holy sword. Although he cared nothing for the Empire, his curiosity as an alchemist immediately piqued. He wanted to study a real holy sword so he could forge a magic blade for Sareth that would surpass it. As the army marched south, troop morale soared thanks to Rowan's invention. Down in the scorching volcanic region, tents and uniforms woven from wind cloth kept everyone cool and dry. Rowan also discovered a clever use for his failed light cloth. By turning storage bags transparent with a touch of magic, soldiers could instantly check their inventory without opening anything. Chancellor Corvin did limit the use of advanced items like the simple warehouse, just to keep the troops from getting confused. Still, the elite units marched fully equipped with Rowan's pendants and specialized gear. Reaching the base of the mountain, Sareth convened a final strategy meeting. General Falk's fire-breathing units would take the front line to burn away Vaskar's webs, while the Minotaur squads, strengthened by Rowan's health pendants, handled all close combat. To deal with any excess webbing the flames couldn't burn, the commanders carried storage items designed to suck the threads away entirely. With the strategy locked in, the Demon Territory's elite stood ready to meet the Imperial Army and begin the hunt. The Demon Territory leaders wrapped up their final meeting, fully prepared to launch the hunt. The army planned to clear the spiderwebs using Rowan's storage items, energize the Minotaurs with his special pendants, and equip their mages with his laser pointers to strike targets from afar. Sareth cautioned her captains against arrogance, while Chancellor Corvin grumbled about the Empire keeping their strategy suspiciously quiet. Rowan suspected the Imperial forces wanted to farm these monsters to train their weakest soldiers, a risky gamble that could easily backfire. A messenger suddenly rushed in, reporting that the Imperial Army had already engaged the enemy near the border on their own. Over at the Imperial camp, Minister of Military Affairs Draven was busy putting on a show. He dragged along Princess Rosalind, a platinum-haired youth wielding the legendary Holy Sword. They intended to use disgraced nobles as living bait to drag the monster Vaskar out into the open. Rosalind would then deliver a flashy killing blow, proving the Empire's supremacy to the watching demon army. When the battle erupted, Rosalind charged the giant spider, her blade blazing with holy light. Hoping to look heroic, she quickly discovered she had marched straight into a trap. A swarm of smaller spiders poured out from beneath the boss's belly, swarming her instantly. Rosalind burned through all her magic power just to fend off the tiny pests. This left her utterly drained, rooted to the spot as the towering beast turned its full attention her way. Right as Vaskar lunged to finish her off, a tiny red dot painted itself onto the monster's forehead. A crimson beam stretched across the battlefield, originating from the distant hills where the demon army waited. The gap was far too wide for any normal spell to cross. A colossal shockwave of energy slammed directly into that red dot. Half of the beast's head vanished in a spray of gore, sparing the princess's life. Rosalind froze in sheer shock, unable to grasp how demon mages could land a flawless strike from an impossible range. The Demon Territory forces unleashed a torrential barrage of magic, hammering their target with pinpoint accuracy. Every single spell homed in on the laser pointer's crimson mark, tearing away the rest of Vaskar's head and severing its thick legs. As the mutilated beast thrashed in agony, the Imperial lines crumbled into total disarray. Drained from fighting off the swarms, an exhausted Rosalind had to be dragged into retreat by Commander Draven. The Empire's blockade shattered, completely ruining their scheme to secure a glorious victory for the princess. Humiliation burned in Rosalind's chest, saved by the exact demons she had meant to outshine. Observing from the hills, Demon Lord Sareth and Chancellor Corvin stared in awe at the laser pointer's true potential. It did far more than just extend a spell's range. It acted as a massive magical amplifier. Establishing a physical tether of mana, the beam sucked every soldier's attack into a single, concentrated point, fusing the raw output of dozens of mages into one cataclysmic strike. Sereth realized Rowan had unwittingly forged a game-changing weapon of mass destruction. Refusing to let the humans get slaughtered, Sereth commanded her forces to bail out the retreating empire. General Falk and his minotaurs, surging with energy from Rowan's health pendants, readied for melee while the mages kept up their artillery fire. Guided by the laser, elven squads shredded the remaining monsters from a distance so immense that targets barely looked like specks. To ensure the Empire never underestimated her again, Sereth decided to display her personal might. She summoned her Void Magic Flame, a pitch-black fire capable of erasing existence itself. Because the pointer drew its energy directly from dark magic, it forged an unbreakable link between Sereth and her destructive spell, allowing her to drag the black flames across the battlefield simply by sweeping the red dot. She swept away the smaller spiders without breaking a sweat, steering the inferno from target to target like a remote-controlled disaster. Realizing it was hopelessly outmatched, Vaskar scrambled to retreat. Sereth pinned the creature against a sheer rock face with crushing force. Trapped under the relentless pressure of the black flames, the massive beast finally collapsed and died. Demon soldiers erupted in cheers, hailing Sereth as a ruler even mightier than the first demon lord. Meanwhile, Falk and his shock troops stood around awkwardly, bitter that Rowan's inventions made the fight so trivial they never even swung their weapons. They watched Sereth declare total victory. She hailed the Imperial Army, demanding a parley with Princess Rosalind to discuss their supposed joint operation. Despite her annoyance at the Empire for breaking their pact and marching alone, Sereth kept her tone diplomatic for the sake of long-term peace. She hoped this forced cooperation would teach the Empire's citizens to view demons as allies instead of monsters. An hour later, the two factions pitched their separate camps. While the demon forces celebrated a flawless, casualty-free victory, the Imperial camp languished as a miserable mess of wounded soldiers and bruised egos. Swallowing their pride, Princess Rosalind and Draven agreed to the summit. They marched toward the Demon Lord's tent to face the music for their failed gamble. The leaders convened at a neutral midpoint in the valley between the two camps. Sereth, Chancellor Corvin, and General Falk stood tall for the demon side. Princess Rosalind and Minister of Military Affairs Draven arrived to represent the Empire. Still soaked in monster blood and shivering slightly, Rosalind forced herself to thank Sereth for the rescue. She admitted her powerlessness, clearly terrified after watching the demon army obliterate a beast her holy sword couldn't even scratch. Seeing the princess so broken stirred a bit of pity in Sereth, but she found herself distracted by the sheer destructive force of Rowan's laser pointer. Stepping forward to formally introduce herself as the Demon Lord, she tried to offer Rosalind some comfort. She assured the girl that even a legendary hero would struggle against such a beast, and called her wounds a testament to her bravery. Rosalind struggled for words, so Draven took over, thanking the demons before attempting to spin the narrative. He framed the fight as a shared victory between both nations, a blatant lie that quickly irritated Calvin Falk. Sticking to their agreed strategy, Corbin demanded to know why the Empire launched an early assault instead of waiting to group up. This reckless maneuver, he pointed out, had nearly triggered a complete disaster. Sereth cornered Rosalind for the truth, pressing her on whether the Empire had purposely drawn the monster out, which would be treated as an act of war. Before the princess could confess, Draven cut in. The minister pinned the entire disaster on a rogue band of criminals and deserters who had supposedly acted without orders. Rosalind, he claimed, had only fought the monster to rescue those stranded men. This transparent lie was crafted to save face and cover up their failed attempt to steal the glory. To buy their silence, Draven offered a hefty bribe, handing over a chest of treasure alongside a formal letter of gratitude. Refusing to let the demons question these guilty soldiers, he insisted the men were far too injured to speak. Stepping aside with her advisors, Sereth quickly debated the offer. Corbin pushed them to take both the gold and the document. Having official proof that the Empire owed them a debt would be a massive political advantage down the line. The broken promise left Falk seething, but his leader managed to talk him down. She ordered the commander to secretly sweep the monster's nest afterward, track down the deserters, and extract the truth. Returning to the tent, Sereth accepted the terms. Just as the meeting wrapped up, Rosalind voiced one final question. Fascinated by the long-range demon magic, she asked if a wandering alchemist was responsible, noting someone had recently fixed her sword and she intended to track him down. Rosalind's tone shifted abruptly, referring to this alchemist as nothing more than a lowly tool. She intended to weaponize him for the Empire, demanding he devote his body and soul to the royal family. Hearing that arrogance made Sereth's blood boil. It dawned on her that the Imperials had no idea they had thrown away a genius like Rowan when they offered him as a sacrifice. Disgust washed over her. Rosalind only cared about Rowan's utility, treating him like a piece of property. Sereth's voice dropped to a freezing chill as she flatly refused to share any details. She told the princess the Empire had made its choice to throw him away, and now they had to choke on that mistake. Surging with protective rage, Sereth ripped off her mask and glared Rosalind down with blazing red eyes. She yelled that Rowan was happy living in the demon territory, that he was her dearest friend, and that she would never hand him over to people who only wanted to exploit his gifts. Then the reality set in. She had just screamed about how much she loved living with Rowan in front of an entire delegation. Flushing a bright, embarrassed red, Sereth shoved her mask back into place. She awkwardly adjourned the meeting, mumbling about peaceful relations while her advisors stood frozen in shock at the sudden outburst. Thoroughly rattled by the Demon Lord's intense glare, Rosalind and Draven stammered out apologies and fled the tent. Minister of Military Affairs Draven attempted to smooth things over. He praised Sereth's dark flames as a terrifying power that commanded Imperial respect, but she refused the flattery. Meeting his gaze coldly, she declared that this strength did not belong to her. It came from someone the Empire tossed aside as weak, and without his profound knowledge, her army would never have won so effortlessly. Draven stared in confusion. Sereth simply grinned, called it a lesson he desperately needed to learn, and walked away. Miles away, Rowan marched toward the monster's shattered nest alongside Pym and a squad commanded by Ilsa. The group scoured the area for surviving spiders or stray Imperial soldiers. Both Ilsa and Pym felt nervous about exposing Rowan in the open. They feared he might cross paths with someone from his former life. To ease their minds, Rowan slipped on a newly crafted dark magic robe. As dusk settled, the enchanted fabric drank the ambient light, rendering him practically invisible among the shadows. His main goal was to scavenge spider remains for his research. By analyzing the monster's wounds, he planned to reverse engineer the princess's holy sword and forge a weapon that outclassed it. Suddenly, the scouts spotted a lone Imperial soldier. Pym and Ilsa shoved Rowan into the tree line, leaving Ilsa to handle the intruder. The man, clad in worn leather armor, claimed he had been separated from his unit during the monster attack. As the soldier stumbled closer, Rowan instantly recognized the face. It was none other than the guard captain who served his father, Duke Aldrich Kessler. This very man had helped frame Rowan, mocking him mercilessly on the day of his exile. Sensing a trap, Rowan handed Pym a specialized cushion and ordered her to make the soldier sit on it. Settling onto the cushion, the guard captain produced a sealed letter. He claimed Duke Kessler finally realized his grave mistake and desperately wanted to apologize to his son. The man even addressed Rowan as his lord, a sickening display of fake respect. Following Rowan's script, Pym and Ilsa grilled the captain about their master's favorite hobbies to test his loyalty. The man stammered, unable to answer a single question because he had never cared about Rowan in the first place. Having seen enough, Rowan finally stepped out of the shadows and revealed himself. Seeing the demon army protect and respect Rowan left the captain completely stunned. Despite the captain demanding he read the letter in private, Rowan refused. Instead, he handed it to Ilsa and Pym to read aloud for the entire camp. The message was an obvious trap. The note contained a fake apology from his father, followed by orders to spy on the demon territory, report General Falk's troop numbers, and eventually return to the Empire, bringing Ilsa along as a guest who would clearly be treated as a hostage. In return for this treason, his father promised to welcome him back into the household. Disgust washed over Rowan. Recognizing the stiff language of the Empire's higher-ups rather than his father's words, he severed those ties for good. Standing before the assembled soldiers, he formally renounced the name Kessler, declaring that from this day forward, he would take his late mother's surname, living solely as Rowan Ambrose, an alchemist of the demon territory. His absolute resolve brought Pym and Ilsa to tears, while the demon soldiers erupted in cheers, pledging their loyalty to Rowan Ambrose, regardless of his human origins. Losing his mind, the guard captain screamed that the boy had abandoned all noble pride and grace. Rowan flatly replied that he had no use for those things anyway. He ordered the man to return and tell his master that Rowan Kessler was dead. Yanking at his sword to escape, the captain suddenly realized he couldn't move an inch. He was glued to the boulder. The comfortable seat Rowan had offered him earlier was a specialized cushion designed to snare monsters. It worked just as perfectly on human targets, leaving the officer pinned down while the demon army closed the distance. Thrashing wildly, the captain fought to break free, but the trap only clamped down harder against the rock with every struggle. Watching the man squirm, Rowan calmly suggested he looked tired and ought to just relax. Panic set in as the captain grew convinced his own muscles were failing him, completely unaware he was hopelessly caught in another of Rowan's custom inventions. A genuine apology might have convinced Rowan to let the messenger walk away, but the Empire's pathetic attempt to turn him into a spy crossed the final line. Shortly after, the main demon forces arrived to secure the camp. Spotting a human soldier plastered to a boulder, Demon Lord Sereth stared in utter confusion until Rowan explained the trap. Getting the full story, Sereth ordered Chancellor Corvin and General Falk to drag the captain into custody. They planned to interrogate the prisoner for intel, then toss him back to the Empire to avoid any claims of mistreatment. Rowan quietly handed Ilsa the secret mechanism to release the cushion, while the troops cracked open castle wine to celebrate their overwhelming victory. Later that evening, Sereth summoned Rowan and Pym to her private tent for a serious discussion. She questioned whether Rowan had ever repaired a magic sword during his time in the Empire. A memory surfaced of patching up an old, cracked blade for some aristocrat years ago, infusing it with light and earth attributes right before being dragged off the project. Sereth revealed that this specific weapon belonged to Princess Rosalind, who was now hunting down the mysterious, wandering alchemist who restored it. Ruki laid the truth out for Rowan, explaining that Rosalind planned to track him down and force him into eternal servitude for the royal family. Sereth confessed she had already screamed at the princess and rejected the demand on the spot, refusing to lose her friend. Guilt weighed on her for making that choice without his permission. But Rowan quickly put her at ease. He assured the Demon Lord he had zero intention of returning to a country that treated him like a disposable tool. Life in the demon territory brought him real happiness, giving him the freedom and appreciation he always deserved. Hearing those words, Sereth removed her mask, her eyes softening with relief as she thanked him. The conversation then shifted to the guard captain's letter. Rowan pointed out the stiff, overly formal language his father never used, proving the Empire's elite had drafted the message. He suspected the military commander sent the messenger, fully expecting him to get caught, hoping to plant seeds of doubt among the demons. Pym and Sereth just laughed off the entire concept, knowing Rowan's loyalty was unbreakable. After all, a hidden spy would never hand out overpowered weapons like the laser pointer to his primary targets. Shifting tones, Rowan offered Sereth an apology, admitting that laying eyes on the princess's holy sword made him realize he lacked the skill to forge a weapon that could surpass it. He asked for time to study and refine his craft. This didn't bother Sereth in the slightest, as she was already blown away by his current creations. She decided that while the main forces marched back to the stronghold, Rowan and Pym would travel alongside General Falk to his domain. There, Rowan would finally oversee the construction of his very own mansion and workshop. Before setting off, Rowan requested a special alchemy permit. Knowing he wouldn't be able to resist building new gadgets on the road, he wanted to avoid terrifying the local townsfolk. Sereth laughed out loud and happily drafted a license, granting him official clearance to perform alchemy anywhere within the demon borders. 10 days later, inside the walls of the imperial capital, the atmosphere felt incredibly grim. Count Ferrant sat down with Draven, the Minister of Military Affairs, fully expecting a handsome reward. Instead, Draven stared him down and coldly declared the mission a catastrophic failure. Rowan hadn't fallen for the letter, and the Empire's scheme to steal credit for the monster subjugation had completely collapsed. Sneering at the Count, Draven announced his services were no longer required. The Empire was permanently finished with the Regis family. Back in the imperial capital, Count Ferrant approached Minister Draven expecting a grand reward. Draven shattered those hopes, revealing his letter was never meant to recruit Rowan, but to poison the demon's trust in him. That scheme collapsed entirely when Rowan read the message aloud to his new allies without a second thought. Mocking the Count, Draven explained that Ferrant only kept his title because the Empire needed a familiar home to offer Rowan later. Stripped of his influence as punishment, the disgraced noble was banished to the deadly southern front to command a mere 10 men. Moving past the failure, Draven joined an imperial council to address the rising threat in the demon lands. The enemy's new long-range artillery posed a massive danger, and the minister strongly suspected this mysterious wandering alchemist was Rowan. Desperate to protect his position, Draven spun their disastrous mission as a strategic victory, reducing the penalties for both himself and Princess Rosalind. Rather than launch another futile attack, the Empire shifted its focus to fortifying its borders and training their princess. Knowing he could not survive another blunder, Draven vowed to restore his honor by any means necessary. Meanwhile, a defeated Princess Rosalind surrendered her holy sword to the treasury. The Demon Lord's taunt about an alchemist who brought her true happiness echoed endlessly in her mind. A strange obsession with this mysterious figure grew inside her, though her fear of Draven's wrath kept her in line. Seeking comfort, she visited her twin sister Cordelia, who lived hidden away in a secluded palace due to her fragile health. While Rosalind fought as a warrior, her identical twin wielded immense light magic that left her unconscious after a single spell. Worried by her sister's growing coldness, Cordelia warned Rosalind not to adopt Draven's ruthless mindset. Rosalind brushed off the concern, convinced the minister was her only true ally, and promised to leverage her status to free Cordelia someday. Ignoring those gentle warnings, she remained utterly certain that following Draven's lead was the only path to power. The Empire isolated Cordelia in that remote palace to hoard her light magic as a strategic weapon. Despite her physical frailty, her abilities could supercharge the Holy Sword and rally an entire army. Over tea, Rosalind confessed she had witnessed a power in the demon territory, capable of reshaping the world. Leaving her sister behind, the princess returned to drilling her soldiers and delivering reports to the emperor. But soon, quiet rumors began to spread regarding a secret meeting between the royal twins and Draven. The following day in the demon territory, Sareth granted Rowan a rare permit to practice alchemy anywhere within her domain. Chancellor Corvin attached a single condition: mass-producing his inventions required formal approval first. This safeguard prevented his powerful creations from destabilizing the local economy. Rowan happily agreed, and once Sareth departed for her castle, he traveled to General Falk's estate with Pym and Ilsa for a grand welcome dinner. The mansion practically boiled inside thanks to the general's blazing fire giant bloodline, making Rowan and Pym sweat profusely. Mid-meal, the alchemist asked if any locals could cast light magic. Studying those attacks would help him block the Empire's holy sword, and eventually forge a superior weapon of his own. Eager to assist, Ilsa promised to scour the surrounding forests for rare races possessing that specific talent. Hoping to make Ilsa more comfortable in her own skin, Rowan gifted her a bundle of experimental fire-resistant cloth. She could finally tailor normal dresses without worrying about her natural body heat burning the fabric to ash. Both the general and his daughter were stunned by the genuine care Rowan showed for their daily struggles. Following dinner, Rowan toured the massive room designated as his new workshop, with Tim settled right next door. As soon as the alchemist retired for the evening, General Falk pulled Ilsa aside for a private conversation. Bound by absolute loyalty to the Demon Lord, the general warned his daughter he could not fully support her growing feelings for Rowan. He heavily implied that Sareth herself harbored a very personal interest in the human. Flushed with embarrassment, Ilsa realized that regardless of rivals, she wanted to dedicate everything she had to serving him. Staring up at his window, she felt reborn now that she was free from her suffocating heavy armor. She firmly told General Falk she intended to grow stronger and become an indispensable partner to the alchemist. When her father teased her about Rowan's exact taste in women, Ilsa was completely unamused. Channeling the raw power from her new health pendant, she forced the massive general to the floor for a fierce lecture. Up in the workshop, Rowan eagerly surveyed his expansive new workspace. The room contained every resource he could ask for, perfectly organizing his magical storage tools. Thumbing through his mystical catalog, he searched for a counter to the blazing holy aura of the princess's sword. Pym slipped in with honey tea and snacks, passing on Queen Sareth's strict orders that he shouldn't work through the night. Chatting with Pym, Rowan explained how heroes from the other world favored incredibly flashy light magic. They supposedly mastered a devastating technique called ultimate vivid light. Scanning the catalog pages together, they stumbled across strange items labeled UV-cut parasols and sunscreen lotions. The pair slowly realized UV was simply an acronym for that legendary ultimate vivid light magic. In the hero's original world, this radiant energy was so common that ordinary children blocked it with simple creams and umbrellas. It was terrifying to imagine a realm where civilians routinely endured concentrated light magic on their bare skin. Weighing his options, Rowan decided crafting the UV-cut parasol was his best initial move. Applying the lotion meant risking a single missed patch of skin, which would invite agonizing burns during combat. Wielding a physical parasol offered a far safer, wider shield against holy strikes on the battlefield. Lost in his frantic planning, he stood half-naked washing up for bed, completely forgetting his surroundings. Noticing the wash basin cooling down, Pym gently offered to scrub his back. She revealed a special waterproof outfit granted by Sareth, allowing her to bathe him without ruining her own clothes. Unable to refuse their overwhelming hospitality, Rowan sighed and let the maid take over. The next morning, Rowan met General Falk to discuss his latest project, a UV-cut parasol. Impressed, the general immediately handed over a chunk of rare silver for the construction. Falk refused any payment, explaining that Rowan's previous invention, the laser pointer, had already saved the army a fortune by preventing injuries during the recent monster hunt. The commander viewed this new parasol as a vital investment in the territory's defense. Noticing Ilsa's absence from the office, Rowan asked where she was. Falk explained she was already out in the field with her guards, tracking down a light magic user to help Rowan test his prototype. Word was Ilsa enjoyed her new assignment, finally patrolling town in normal clothes instead of heavy, sweltering armor. Back in the workshop, Rowan fired up the alchemy process alongside Pym. He flipped through the mail-order catalog to decode the science behind light magic. In this world, light magic was highly destructive, capable of erasing a person's very existence at full strength. To counter such power, the text suggested using a sparkling material to scatter and shatter the incoming spell. Rowan channeled his creation alchemy to forge the parasol from the rare silver and specialized magic cloth, structuring the canopy into 3 complex layers. The outer layer harnessed water attributes to drastically slow the incoming beam. Beneath that, embedded silver grains reflected and scattered the magical energy. The innermost layer featured dark attribute fabric that absorbed lingering energy and funneled it into a magic stone in the handle. The result was a high-rarity masterpiece, capable of canceling out almost any light-based attack or slashing its power by 90%. Testing the parasol against a standard magic lamp yielded an even stronger effect than anticipated. The moment the beam struck the canopy, the fabric rippled like liquid glass. Those silver grains didn't merely block the light, they dismantled the spell structure itself, plunging the lamp into darkness. Rowan and Pym quickly realized that while built for defense, the parasol could instantly extinguish an enemy's light sources. They decided to keep the weapon under wraps as a secret experiment, given the demon territory was a peace and lacking any light-wielding enemies to fight. Just as they sat down for tea, Ilsa burst through the door. Breathless but triumphant, she announced finding a tribe in the western forest with a light magic user. This breakthrough meant Rowan could finally conduct a live field test of his invention. Ilsa explained the forest operated as an independent zone ruled by pixies, meaning even the general held no authority there. They would have to ask for help politely. Joining the group for tea, the guard captain shared her findings. She had scouted the town wearing a casual dress rather than her armor to gather intel smoothly. During her patrol, a soldier mentioned a pixie living in the western woods who cast light magic. Barely a few inches tall, these winged creatures are considered mere myths in the human empire. In the demon territory, however, locals value them for sensing mana currents in the earth, which helps miners locate ore deposits and farmers find rich soil. Despite their helpful nature, the tiny beings remain extremely shy and rarely show themselves. Rowan refused to leverage the demon lord's authority to coerce them into helping, but Ilsa delivered a surprising twist. The pixies had requested a meeting with Rowan first. The reason was simple enough. His new workshop and home sat right on the edge of their forest. General Falk had secured an ideal plot, rich with water and magical energy, making it so close to the pixie domain that the residents wanted to vet their new neighbor. The tribe typically communicated by leaving letters on a designated tree stump, and upon hearing an alchemist was moving in, they sent word requesting a parley. Rowan agreed to the meeting, hoping to establish goodwill and avoid any early misunderstandings. Pym and Ilsa gathered tribute: milk, fresh nuts, and magic stones. All standard favorites for pixies. Taking a more professional angle, Rowan tried to anticipate their deeper needs before they even asked. Trekking toward the woods the next day, Pym noted that while most of the fairies commanded wind or water, a rare few were born wielding light or dark attributes. Reaching the designated stump at the forest border, they found Ilsa's previous letter gone, yet no written reply remained. Suddenly, a tiny pixie named Tilda peeked out from behind the wood. She sported black hair and wore a single, oversized leaf as a makeshift dress. The little creature trembled, terrified by rumors that humans were monstrous brutes who destroyed everything with magic. Wanting her to feel safe, Rowan dropped to the grass to bring himself down to her level. Surprised by his gentle demeanor, Tilda took a leap of faith and hopped directly onto his open palm. She was so fragile, he could have crushed her with a twitch of his fingers. She confessed the real reason her people stayed hidden. They felt embarrassed by their primitive leaf garments and thought it rude to appear so shabby. Then, Tilda's expression hardened. She offered herself as raw material for his alchemy experiments, provided he granted her tribe one favor. Rowan immediately shut the offer down, vowing he would never harvest a living person for his craft. Rowan explained he simply needed a light magic user to test his latest invention, leaving Tilda looking relieved, yet harboring a lingering sadness. She revealed that their only light magic pixie, a girl named Lumi, faced grave danger. Her immense light magic left her tiny body hopelessly frail, confining her to a sickbed. Desperate, Tilda begged Rowan to use his alchemy to save her friend. Rowan discovered that Lumi, a rare light attribute pixie, suffered from this debilitating weakness since birth. Her frame failed to handle her own power, causing the magic to stagnate and sicken her. Bathing in the river normally circulated this blocked energy, but Lumi lacked the strength to make the journey. Rowan quickly pulled a foot bath from his magic warehouse, explaining that the device used fire and wind stones to churn warm water, acting like a miniature river for the tiny pixie. Renee hesitated, but stepping inside the dry basin and feeling its perfect size convinced her this could save Lumi. Pim and Ilsa chimed in, sharing their own refreshing experiences with the tub. They confirmed the churning water would absolutely restore Lumi's block magic circulation. Tilda then raised another issue. Pixies fly only when their clothes channel magic, which usually meant wearing fresh leaves, but Lumi's light magic rejected regular foliage, leaving her grounded and struggling to stay dressed. Rowan instantly produced a bolt of pure light magic cloth. Sharing her exact attribute, the fabric would channel her power flawlessly, prompting Pim and Ilsa to grab their tailoring tools. They faced one glaring issue. The cloth turns completely transparent when channeled with magic. To fix this, the girls sewed heavy layers and frills, keeping the final outfit modest. Working inside the carriage, Renee voiced her eager desire to explore the world Rowan reshaped. Rowan promised to supply attribute-matched cloth to every pixie, pending official permission from the Demon Lord's palace. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Tilda kissed Rowan's forehead and swore eternal loyalty from all pixies. Once the girls finished sewing the dress, Tilda gathered up the precious gifts, the tub, the layered clothes, and fresh food, and darted into the forest to heal Lumi. Mission accomplished, Rowan, Pim, and Ilsa traveled to a nearby town to meet General Falk's butler, Gustav. Gustav held orders to tour Rowan through potential sites for a new alchemy workshop. The butler guided the group to a sprawling two-story stone manor perched on a hill. This former merchant's shop sat perfectly nestled between the bustling town, the craggy mountains, and a dense forest. The grand property featured a stone well, an overgrown vegetable garden, and dozens of empty rooms. Rowan immediately sensed a thick presence of ambient magic pooling across the land. Elements surrounded them: water from the well, earth in the garden, and wind riding the steady breeze. The estate looked flawless for his alchemy, leaving Ilsa bouncing with excitement that they might become neighbors. Right before Rowan finalized the purchase, a strange, rhythmic clapping echoed through the air. The noise completely bypassed his companions, ringing out directly from the building's slanted roof. Glancing upward, Rowan spotted tiny figures frantically banging the wooden shingles to catch his eye. 4 winged pixies peeked cautiously over the roof's edge. Pim followed his gaze, causing the naturally shy creatures to scramble out of sight. Each fairy sported a distinct hair color: yellow, blue, red, and brilliant green. These bright shades clearly represented the primal elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. Rowan quickly realized these tiny guardians were desperately sending him a warning. Popping up and vanishing in a strict sequence, the pixies signaled a severe magical imbalance plaguing the site. Their gestures revealed an overwhelming surge of wind and fire magic, while earth and water barely existed. That perfectly explained the dead, withered vegetable patch and the completely bone-dry well. Gustav and Ilsa gasped, stunned that Rowan diagnosed the dry well without even glancing inside. But Rowan guarded the pixies' secret, respecting their timid nature. Moving on, the group inspected a second property pressed close against a roaring volcano and boiling hot springs. The fairies materialized on this roof too, gesturing wildly to show that fire magic smothered all other elements. Rowan rejected the scorched site instantly, knowing a true alchemy workshop required perfect elemental harmony. Their tour finally ended at a third location, a sprawling 2-story mansion boasting a lush garden and a deep, full well. This old estate belonged directly to the general, featuring a massive central hall and a reinforced boiler room, ideal for heavy-duty alchemy experiments. The pixies reappeared on the roof, this time numbering 7 in total, including 2 gripping black flowers to proudly represent dark magic. Their dance confirmed a healthy blend of earth, water, wind, and darkness, spiced with just enough fire, prompting Rowan to claim the spot. Pim finally spotted the hidden fairies, admitting she had tracked Rowan's gaze so closely she caught them in the act. Immensely grateful, Rowan vowed to reward these shy creatures for their vital guidance. He planned to weave tailored magic clothing for the entire colony, freeing them from fragile, crumbling leaves. Giving away magical items on this massive scale, however, demanded strict official permission. To clear the red tape, he drafted a formal request aimed straight at Chancellor Corvin. Without warning, the pixies dropped their shy act and flew directly into the open group. Deeply moved by Rowan saving their friend Lumi, the tiny creatures offered to personally deliver his letters to the Demon Lord's castle. A colorful swarm of fairies, from relaxed water types to wildly energetic fire types, all eagerly awaited their first mission. They all crammed inside Rowan's shirt and jacket, staying out of sight during the conversation. Thanking the tiny creatures for their help, Rowan drafted his application for the magic cloth. He also needed another trip to the forest to check on Lumi and look for any side effects from the light attribute dress. Before that thought even finished crossing his mind, the pixies darted toward the woods to deliver his message. This left Ilsa and Gustav standing paralyzed, reeling from the sight of such legendary creatures. Rowan offered a simple smile, satisfied he had found both a true home and fiercely loyal new neighbors. Gustav stood completely stunned by the pixies' absolute trust in Rowan, especially after watching them shelter in his clothes. Swearing to keep their existence a strict secret, the soldier headed off to report the land selection to the general. With the official business fully settled, Rowan, Pim, and Ilsa headed back into the western forest to check on Tilda and the ailing pixie Lumi. The deep woods formed a twisting maze of massive roots and dense, tangled branches. Because pixies navigate by air, they never bothered carving out walking paths, meaning the group had to rely entirely on the tiny creatures to guide their way. Their guides drummed out rhythms on tree trunks and whispered directions through the rustling leaves. Along the way, the fairies shared a handful of rare elver fruit with their guests. These berries proved incredibly scarce, a delicacy the Demon Lord himself only tasted once a year. Rowan split the sweet, juicy harvest with Pim and Ilsa as they trekked deeper into the thicket. Eventually, the thick trees broke to reveal a stunning clearing centered around a glowing spring. There they spotted Lumi, the platinum blonde pixie, lounging happily in the footbath Rowan gifted her. Looking vastly recovered, she explained to Rowan that the flowing water finally unclogged the stagnant magic in her body, curing her constant fevers. For the very first time in her life, she felt completely healthy and full of strength. Lumi then slipped into the new dress, woven entirely from light magic cloth. Because the fabric perfectly matched her innate magic, she controlled the garment like a second skin. Manipulating the skirt and ribbons as secondary wings, she flew effortless circles around Rowan's head. Witnessing this dramatic improvement, Rowan resolved to sew magical outfits for the rest of the colony. Using Tilda as a mannequin for measurements, he planned to weave magic wings and ribbons into every outfit to boost their flight and safety. As they worked, Rowan and Pim stumbled onto a major realization. This enchanted cloth wasn't just decorative. It functioned as an extended sensory organ, allowing the wearer to physically feel the surrounding air and mana. They deduced that ancient heroes likely wore similar garments back in the day, which would easily explain their impossibly fast reflexes and their ability to sense attacks coming from behind. By gifting these clothes to the pixies, Rowan realized he was accomplishing far more than just being neighborly. He was actively helping their entire species evolve into a much stronger form. Rowan and Pim recognized this magic cloth was far more than simple fabric. It served as a tactical tool, granting the pixies the same blinding reflexes as the heroes of old. Distributing this gear meant Rowan wasn't just showing kindness. He was forcing an evolutionary leap for their race. Chancellor Corvin possessed good reason to fear this cloth reaching the Empire, considering its world-altering power. Eager to test his next major invention, Rowan turned his attention to Lumi. He produced a white UV-cut parasol, explaining its design aimed to neutralize the Empire's strongest light magic. The surrounding fairies watched in absolute fascination, having never seen a parasol, with several guessing it was a tiny portable house. Brimming with newly restored health, Lumi eagerly agreed to assist the test. She promised to stand by Rowan's side and bombard the parasol with light magic until he felt completely satisfied. With the experiment prepared, Rowan needed to fire off a formal application to the Demon Lord's castle to legally distribute the clothes. Asking for 2 volunteers to deliver the document instantly sparked a borderline riot. Every single pixie in the clearing rushed him, swarming his pockets and shouting their desperate bids to help. Gently peeling them off his clothes, he selected 2 messengers, handed them fresh outfits, and watched as the pair zipped off toward the castle at a blistering pace. Back at the Demon Lord's castle, Sereth and Chancellor Corvin sat enjoying a rare pocket of peace. The two realized they missed Rowan's chaos. quietly admitting the fortress felt hollow in his absence. They soon struck up a friendly wager regarding the boy's current antics. Corvin wagered that Rowan was currently busy befriending a new race, while Sareth remained firmly convinced he had already invented something insane and was busy drafting an application. A frantic guard shattered their debate, bursting through the doors to announce legendary pixies had reached the front gates. Sareth and Corvin stared in stunned silence. Illegally efficient as always, Rowan hadn't just fulfilled one prediction, but both. He tamed the most reclusive race in the world and deployed them as personal couriers for a new invention request. Reading over the submitted document nearly gave Corvin a nervous breakdown. Rowan wasn't merely asking for permission to dress the pixies. He proposed a systemic change, allowing the reclusive creatures to fully integrate into society and expand the demon territory. Yet the attached letter detailing his new parasol proved even more staggering. He casually claimed to have forged an item capable of blocking ultimate vivid light, the legendary magic that had once shattered the first demon lord's defenses. While Corvin paced the room, hitting his head against a pillar in disbelief, Sareth remained surprisingly calm. Ever since telling Princess Rosalind she would never let Rowan go, she had mentally prepared herself for his genius. She accepted everything about him, his wild ideas, his history, and his habit of doing the impossible. Leaving Corvin to process the shock, Sareth headed outside to meet the pixies herself, eager to hear every detail about her favorite alchemist's latest projects. She found the tiny creatures waiting in the castle's quiet courtyard. To prove her trust, she removed her mask and robe, revealing the face of a young blonde girl, a rare sight, given she usually hid her appearance to look more intimidating to her generals. The spirits of water and earth respected her honesty and finally showed themselves. They already wore the white dresses crafted by Pim and Ilsa, twirling happily to show off their new clothes. The pair explained how they met Rowan and how he saved their friend Lumi with a simple foot bath and magic cloth. Filled with gratitude, they swore their loyalty to him on the spot. To demonstrate the fabric's true power, the two sprites launched into the sky, flying at supersonic speeds. They used their flared skirts as wings and ribbons to dodge tree branches with perfect precision. Sareth stood stunned, realizing Rowan hadn't just tailored some garments, he had transformed the little creatures into the ultimate scouts and messengers for the demon territory. Without hesitation, she approved Rowan's request to clothe all the pixies. Chancellor Corvin might find the expense excessive, but the benefit to the nation proved too good to ignore. She also authorized the light magic experiment with Lumi, while the tiny guests hid inside her robe to snack on sweets. They shared stories of Rowan, describing a swarm of 20 pixies tackling him for a hug. A smile broke across Sareth's face as she realized how much life had improved since his arrival. That peaceful mood shattered when Chancellor Corvin returned with a letter from the Dolgarian Empire. Draven, the Minister of War, claimed their soldiers acted clumsily during the recent monster hunt and announced a massive border exercise in 20 days. The letter invited the demons to attend and watch them humbly display their pride, showing off their powerful light magic. It was a blatant provocation, and Sareth suspected foul play. She immediately ordered Corvin to dispatch a tailor and extra fabric to Rowan's workshop, ensuring every pixie got equipped. She also decided to personally attend Rowan's experiment, needing to see if his new parasol could stop Imperial light magic. Though hoping for peace, she knew they had to prepare for a fight. Meanwhile, back in the Empire, the Minister of War moved his next piece by summoning Rosalind's sister, Princess Cordelia, for a new mission. Draven met the princess in private to deliver a cold ultimatum from the Emperor. Cordelia received orders to travel north for 3 years, leading a military exercise that relied on her powerful light magic. A transparent move designed to intimidate the demon territory. Draven promised that upon completing this duty, she could return to the capital and resume her research on magic for daily life. Despite her physical weakness and deep suspicions regarding Draven's motives, Cordelia accepted the mission just to protect her twin sister Rosalind. Draven's plan proved utterly ruthless. He needed to separate the sisters to fully exploit their individual strengths. Stationing Cordelia at the border showcased the Empire's terrifying light magic, while keeping Rosalind available to win battles and restore his own damaged reputation. He even assigned his adjutant, Marta, to monitor the local commanders and keep the operation strictly on track. To keep Rosalind motivated, he lied, claiming Cordelia volunteered for the harsh border mission to make up for Rosalind's past failures. Meanwhile, back at General Falk's mansion, Lumi had fully recovered thanks to Rowan's invention. Her magic circulated perfectly, and she felt ready to test his UV nullifying parasol. With Queen Sareth and Chancellor Corvin visiting to witness the trial, the general threw a grand reception. Rowan ensured the shy pixies got a private, snack-filled area in the hall, letting them join the fun without being spotted by other guests. Haunted by memories of imperial nobles mocking his lack of combat strength, Rowan initially tried to skip the party entirely. Pim finally convinced him to attend by mentioning that Sareth and Ilsa were eager to show off their new dresses, especially since Ilsa could finally wear one, completely protected by Rowan's fire-resistant magic claw. Realizing how much his friends valued his presence, he gave in and agreed to go. Before the festivities kicked off, Rowan began brainstorming a new project aimed at improving trade. While official relations between the Empire and the Demon Territory remained tense, unofficial border trade thrived. Paging through his magical catalog, he searched for an invention to help goods circulate more easily between the two realms. Even as he braced himself for the political pressure of the looming military exercise, he suggested a fresh way to speed up smuggling, giving the Pixies an ultra-small, simplified warehouse. Since the tiny spirits moved entirely unnoticed, they could haul goods across borders far safer than any visible merchant wagon. Chancellor Corvin loved the efficiency, but raised concerns over security. If a Pixie dropped an entire warehouse out in the wild, it would invite disaster. The Chancellor insisted that such a convenient item required an absolutely unbreakable lock. Rowan pulled a perfect solution from his catalog: the chain lock. But this was no ordinary padlock. The description promised it anchored objects directly to the earth, rendering them immovable unless a thief could lift the whole planet. He figured heroes from the other world originally forged these chains to bind unimaginably powerful monsters. Now he intended to apply this world-binding magic just to bolt shut his warehouses. That guaranteed nobody could touch the inventory without the correct access code. Right before the banquet kicked off, Pim modeled the new dress she stitched from his water attribute magic cloth. Since the enchanted fabric mimicked flowing water, molded effortlessly to match the exact contours of the wearer's body. Lacking any frills or heavy ribbons, the garment ended up clinging like a sleek swimsuit, highlighting every single curve of her figure. Struck by her beauty, Rowan instantly blurted out that she should never wear something so revealing in public. Thrilled by his sudden protectiveness, Pim promised to save the outfit solely for him. Soon, the celebration kicked off in the main hall, where Demon Lord Sareth took the stage to address the crowd, loudly praising Rowan's recent inventions. She highlighted how his sun-blocking cloth finally let the reclusive Pixies step outdoors and join demon society. Chancellor Corvin stepped up next, delivering a lengthy, solemn introduction for the alchemist. He hailed the young man as a trusted ally who played a vital role in slaying the monster Vaskar. But Corvin laid the praise on so thick that the local demons started whispering about a legendary warrior boasting terrifying combat skills, completely ignoring that he was just a crafter who enjoyed weaving pillows and health trinkets. Taking the podium, Rowan offered a humble speech, thanking the Demon Lord for her continued backing. Once the stuffy formalities ended, he retreated to a quiet table to hang out with Ilsa and Pim. Ilsa showed up in a fiery yellow gown, perfectly cut to show off her new health promotion pendant. Pim swapped into a modest sky blue dress that originally belonged to Ilsa's mother. Watching his friends laugh and mingle made him realize his so-called useless alchemy achieved far more than just forging items. His weird crafts were quietly forging a community where outcasts finally felt safe. Following the banquet, Rowan flushed red when Pim grew bashful under his intense gaze. Needing to cool off, he wandered over to the private quarters assigned to the Pixies. A deep peace settled over the room, bathed in warm golden sunlight. The tiny spirits swarmed him in excitement, demanding he sit down and share their afternoon tea. They formed a neat, single-file line so he could spoon-feed them sweet tea and crushed cookies, which left the spirits feeling warm and pampered. A few even began stripping off their new clothes to avoid stains, claiming that wearing his gifted fabric felt exactly like receiving a hug from him. He quickly talked them out of undressing and settled into the quiet moment, completely unaware that Sareth, Ilsa, Pim spied on him from down the hall, all harboring a twinge of jealousy over his special bond with the tiny fairies. An hour later, the whole group hiked out to the woods to officially test the UV nullifying parasol. Checking his catalog notes, Rowan explained that UV likely translated to ultimate vivid light. This was the same legendary magic that previously shattered the Demon Lord's protective barriers. The umbrella held a strict rating to block 90% of that lethal energy. To guarantee total safety for General Falk and Chancellor Corvin, who boldly volunteered to hold the device, Rowan refused to rely on a single shield. He snapped open a second, then a third parasol, calculating that stacking them dropped the magic's penetration to a fraction of a percent. Up ahead, Lumi the Light Pixie readied her spell. Spurred on by his cheers, she funneled every drop of her mana into a blinding, vivid light strike. This time, the glowing sphere swelled to the size of a human head, glowing far larger and vastly more volatile than her simple practice shots. When the searing beam struck the first canvas, the light shattered and scattered like harmless raindrops. As the remaining energy bled through the second and third fabric layers, the massive blast withered from a deadly orb down to a speck of sand before winking out completely. Corbin instinctively threw up a personal magic shield, but not a single spark reached him. The test was an overwhelming triumph. That simple triple-layered canopy entirely neutralized one of the most feared magical elements in existence. As the glare faded, Rowan hurried over to check on Corvin and Falk, finding both officers completely unscathed. The parasols absorbed the strike so flawlessly that neither demon felt even a whisper of kinetic impact against their own barriers. Better yet, the gear drained 0 mana, meaning a civilian could lug one around all day without breaking a sweat. Across the clearing, Lumi slumped over, totally drained from burning so much raw power. So, Rowan quickly arranged for her and the rest of the pixies to recover back at his mansion. He even borrowed Pim's specialized foot bath to help the exhausted fairy recharge her magic faster. Later that evening, Rowan formally presented his field data to Demon Lord Sareth. He offered a humble apology for needing 3 clunky umbrellas instead of a single perfect shield, promising to research a way to condense the defense into one item. Sareth just listened, deeply moved. She confessed a lifelong terror of light magic, raised on grim stories of it incinerating past demon lords. But his invention finally cured that fear. Wasting no time, she ordered a massive batch of the UV-cut parasols distributed to the frontline border patrols. Chancellor Corvin quickly raised his hand, pointing out a massive security flaw with the valuable tech. If the Empire captured a soldier or stole a parasol, human mages could easily reverse engineer the defense and counter it. To solve this, Rowan revealed his next invention, the chain lock. It was far from an ordinary mechanism. Forged from black metal, the chain could wrap tightly around an item or an entire warehouse to seal it shut. Rowan demonstrated its landlock mode. When he channeled mana into the metal, auxiliary magical links burrowed deep into the earth, fusing directly with the bedrock. Calvin Falk tried lifting the small box with all their strength, but it refused to budge an inch. Rowan pointed out that unless a thief possessed the sheer power to rip up the ground itself, the item remained completely unmovable. The mechanism tied itself to the user's specific magic signature, rendering it practically impossible to pick or force open. A legendary hero wielding a holy sword or leveling the terrain might shatter the bonds, but it would stop almost any ordinary threat. As a final security measure, Rowan added a lethal fail-safe. If an intruder tried forcing the lock, the chain would instantly constrict, crushing the contents before violently self-destructing. Kelvin Falk stood shocked at the thought of destroying such valuable goods, prompting Rowan to explain his reasoning. Should a demon territory resident face an attack, the landlock forced enemies to waste precious time digging or battering the metal. That delay bought the resident a vital window to escape. Items could always be forged anew, Rowan insisted, but lives were irreplaceable. Moved by his fierce dedication to her people, Sareth briefly lifted her mask, whispering a promise of a personal reward. Not as a ruler, but as a friend. She officially approved the chain lock for deployment, selecting the crush and shatter failsafe to guarantee no advanced technology fell into Imperial hands. Chancellor Corvin finally recognized Rowan not as a reckless tinkerer, but a calculated strategist, throwing his full support behind the project. To monitor the Empire's shifting movements, Sareth and Rowan decided to travel directly to the border alongside Chancellor Corvin. Pim tagged along with the group, while the Pixies received orders to scout the surrounding terrain during the patrol. Nerves and excitement churned in Rowan's gut, knowing his creations now formed an official pillar of the demon territory's defense. Afterward, he retired to the mansion to gather his strength for the long journey ahead. Miles away, an Imperial unit commanded by Captain Emmerich Stauffer marched north toward that exact same border. Emmerich, a fiercely ambitious 24-year-old born into a prominent Marquis family, viewed this expedition as a golden ticket to unseat Draven, the current Minister of Military Affairs. He fully intended to exploit Princess Cordelia's light magic, farming fame to elevate his family's waning status. Remembering Rowan as a useless noble with zero combat talent, Emmerich sneered at Draven's failure to properly manipulate the boy. Using Cordelia as a convenient tool, Emmerich planned to forge his own ruthless path to absolute power. During a brief pause in their march, Emmerich's second-in-command, Marta, checked on the frail Princess Cordelia. Seizing the distraction, Emmerich dispatched his most loyal subordinates ahead to the border town, armed with gold and secret orders. He ordered his men to purchase local influence, root out anyone tied to the demon territory, and track down dormant monsters that Cordelia could effortlessly slaughter to manufacture easy glory. Emmerich smirked, utterly confident the demon lord would never see his maneuvers coming. Inside the carriage, Cordelia spotted a pixie darting through the trees, though Marta quickly dismissed the sighting as mere exhaustion. Drifting into a restless sleep, Cordelia dreamt of the boundless freedom those mythical creatures represented in the old legends. After enduring a grueling trek across rutted roads, the heavy convoy finally rolled into the border town of Halden. Waking the next morning in the mayor's lavish mansion, Cordelia felt the crushing weight of her impending mission. She despised acting as a living weapon, harboring a quiet hope that by burning through her magic reserves, the Empire would eventually deem her useless and allow her to return to her sister Rosalind. Fighting through deep fatigue, she agreed to meet the local leaders to soothe their rising panic over the sudden military occupation. She refused help from her maids, knowing they were Draven spies, and struggled to dress herself, as pulling on even the lightest clothing drained her energy. Wearing a thick veil to mask her identity, she stepped into the hall to greet the mayor and the commercial district head, who welcomed her with profound respect. Standing before the gathered leaders, Princess Cordelia officially introduced herself. She tried reassuring the nervous crowd that the sudden flood of Imperial troops did not signal war, but Captain Emmerich Stauffer rudely cut her off. Bragging about the Empire's crushing strength, he twisted her delicate words, making it sound as if the princess were openly demanding their absolute submission. Before Cordelia could correct the captain and clarify her peaceful intentions, her second-in-command, Marta, stepped in and forcefully dragged the princess away from the gathering. Scolding the princess, Marta snapped that her sole duty was casting light magic for the exercise, not mingling with lowly commoners. Cordelia protested, arguing that the townsfolk were terrified of a looming war against the demon territory. Ignoring the plea entirely, Marta ordered the servant girls to escort the princess straight back to her quarters. Marta made it glaringly clear that she and Emmerich answered only to Minister Draven, treating Cordelia like a disposable asset. Locked away in her quiet room, Cordelia felt more utterly helpless than ever before. Seeking a sliver of comfort, she opened a worn book detailing the exploits of legendary heroes. Reading about their ancient world, she discovered mentions of a device called a smartphone, capable of throwing voices across massive distances. Pushing open her window, she stared out into the night and whispered a desperate wish to those past heroes, begging for a way to warn the demon territory that she had no desire to fight. A faint voice suddenly chimed. "No problem." Cordelia snapped her head around, but her room stood completely empty. Panic spiked as she wondered if the demon territory was already watching her every move. And yet, despite the mounting risk, a quiet hope bloomed that she might one day witness the magical relics of the hero's world. Back at the demon border, Rowan hosted a quiet tea party for Sereth and Pym inside a modest warehouse, just as the Pixies flew in with a reconnaissance report. Lumi reported spotting a massive Imperial battalion, led by a princess in a grand carriage, rolling right into the town of Halden. Hearing the description of her distorted light magic signature, Rowan realized this wasn't the mighty Princess Rosalind. It was her sister Cordelia, someone the Empire was throwing away, just like they did to him. The Pixies also reported a bizarre detail. They had overheard Cordelia wishing for a smartphone. Rowan, Sereth, and Pym froze in shock, knowing smartphones were legendary artifacts from the hero's world. Rowan admitted that while he lacked the skill to craft one right now, he suspected these devices were crucial for some grand ritual. More importantly, the Pixies revealed Cordelia's explicit desire to avoid a war, which complicated things. Despite the princess preaching peace, the Imperial army was advancing onto a major trading plain. Their goal was obvious: harass passing merchants and strangle the demon territory's economy. Sereth recognized the military exercise for what it was: a smokescreen to choke off their trade routes. Eager to help, the Pixies volunteered to sneak back in and speak with Cordelia face to face. Both Sereth and Rowan hesitated, terrified the tiny scouts would fall into the hands of Imperial mages, but the little creatures firmly insisted on doing their part. Pacing the room, Rowan brainstormed a way to sneak them into the town safely. Then Sereth mentioned that the town of Halden employed hundreds of owls and cats for pest control. An idea struck Rowan. Disguised as these common street animals, the Pixies could roam the alleys completely undetected. He knew ordinary birds lacked the intelligence to deliver a letter to a princess, but a pixie wearing an owl or cat disguise could slip into the town effortlessly. Searching his catalog, he discovered the perfect item: animal onesies. These enchanted pajamas granted the wearer the physical form of a puppy, cat, or bird. Rowan frowned, knowing his alchemy currently lacked the power to imbue creations with vibrant life force. His past works, like the magical body pillows, felt completely hollow and inanimate. Growing up isolated in the Empire, he explained, had stunted his grasp on the magic circulation of living beings. To bridge that gap, he needed to physically feel the magic power and body heat of another person. Nervous, he asked Pym for a hug to study her vitality. She agreed, but after a long, agonizingly awkward stare, Rowan decided that simply holding hands would let him trace her water attribute magic. Their magic began to synchronize through their touch, until Sareth stepped in, arguing that true vitality required experiencing multiple types of magic. She grabbed his hands next, flooding him with her potent, dark attribute magic. Then the pixies swarmed him, eagerly providing the final attributes: earth, fire, wind, and light. Absorbing all 6 elements triggered a system notification. Rowan had awakened the pseudo-life grasp skill. This breakthrough allowed him to forge items that mimicked biology so flawlessly, no one could tell them apart from reality. Upgraded with this power, the onesies would turn the pixies into perfectly convincing animals. Armed with this disguise, Rowan prepared to send a message straight to Princess Cordelia. He needed to verify her desire for peace and probe her interest in a smartphone, a legendary artifact that could change the world. Meanwhile, Sareth and Pym headed off to brief Chancellor Corvin and General Falk on the scouting mission. Before leaving, Sareth confirmed they were executing Rowan's other tactic, using a modified chain lock as a snare. They would bait the Imperial soldiers with glittering loot, then activate the lock to pin them in place, weaponizing the Empire's own greed. Miles away, his decoy operation against the Imperial army worked flawlessly. Patrolling the rocky border, Captain Emmerich Mueller and his second-in-command, Mariella, stumbled upon a massive greatsword buried deep within the stone cliff. Wrapped in heavy black chains, the blade looked like a mythical artifact pulled straight from a hero's legend. Emmerich and Marta instantly clashed over who would claim the glory for the find. The captain demanded the credit for himself, while Marta sought to secure the prize for Minister Draven. Refusing to let the other out of their sight, they ordered a full military camp erected at the cliff base to excavate the weapon. The Imperials had no clue this holy sword was just a rusted hunk of scrap Rowan had polished up. He had designed the fake entirely to waste their time and keep them far from the town. Observing the chaotic dig site from a nearby peak were Chancellor Corvin and General Falk. Both wore Rowan's newly crafted animal onesies, which had transformed the proud demon commanders into perfectly realistic lizards. Kel felt utterly ridiculous pulling off the hood of his fluffy green pajamas, but he couldn't deny the disguise worked. Using a chain lock ladder, the pair easily scaled sheer rock faces that normal soldiers couldn't touch. The gear let them monitor the Imperial army's every move in absolute secrecy. Satisfied the Empire had swallowed the bait, they scurried off to report back to Queen Sareth. Miles away, the covert infiltration of Halden finally commenced. Princess Cordelia was resting in her chambers when a white owl landed on the windowsill and, to her absolute shock, spoke. The bird was a pixie, perfectly concealed inside one of Rowan's onesies. Stepping inside, the tiny scout instantly recognized Cordelia's symptoms. Her illness matched Lumi's perfectly. Her own light magic was burning too strong for her fragile body, racking her with constant pain. Speaking on Rowan's behalf, the pixie assured her they wanted peace, but demanded answers about the Imperial aggression at the border. The owl offered Cordelia a deal. If she agreed to negotiate and strive for peace, Rowan would supply the same healing alchemy he used to save the pixie. Stunned, Cordelia sensed no danger from the small creature. She recognized this as the very chance she had been praying for. Leaning in, she assured the bird she harbored no hatred for demons and truly wanted peace, primarily to keep her sister Rosalind from becoming Minister Draven's tool of war. Addressing this mysterious envoy from the demon territory, Cordelia felt a surge of hope that she had finally found an ally to reform the Empire from within. Rising from her chair, she bowed formally, welcoming the white owl as an official envoy. The creature immediately demanded the Empire relocate its upcoming military exercises. It pointed out that the current drills in the Western Plains posed a massive threat, with Imperial soldiers launching magic and arrows straight at civilian roads. Blood drained from Cordelia's face as the truth hit her. General Emmerich wasn't running simple drills. He deliberately harassed the demon territory, cutting off trade routes essential for both nations' survival. Out in this monster-infested wasteland, humans and demons frequently relied on each other just to survive. Emmerich's maneuvers were no display of strength, merely reckless bullying that endangered everyone. The owl swore that if Cordelia leveraged her influence to shift the training grounds, its master would grant her a remedy to cure her failing circulation. The familiar then confessed it had endured the exact same affliction, a severe chill and weakness brought on by excessive light magic, before Rowan Ambrose cured it. Cordelia recognized the name instantly. Rowan was the young hostage the Empire had discarded. Proving his sincerity, Rowan offered a staggering vow. If Cordelia found the treatment lacking, he would stand completely unguarded and take the full force of her strongest light magic as punishment. Moved by his incredible courage and willingness to risk his own life for peace, the princess chose to trust him. Removing her precious silver ring, she offered it as a pledge and swore to halt the Imperial soldiers. Midnight brought the owls back, hauling a square tub they called a footbath. The moment Cordelia submerged her feet, the warm, vibrating water went to work massaging her skin. Deep inside her, the stagnant magic that caused her illness finally began to circulate. Such intense relief washed over her that she slapped a hand over her mouth to muffle a cry. Following the treatment, the bird presented a special set of translucent undergarments crafted by Rowan. The messenger explained these pieces were engineered specifically to help light magic users regulate their blood flow. Even if the sheer fabric left her feeling deeply embarrassed, Cordelia slipped them on anyway, gasping as her strength returned in a rush. It hit her just how far the Demon Territory's technology outpaced the Empire's, rendering any war an absolute fool's errand. Waking up the next morning, Cordelia felt like a completely different person. Every ounce of sluggishness had vanished, allowing her to channel magic without breaking a sweat. Even her skin held a healthy glow, and her hair shone with newfound luster. Determined to honor Rowan's bravery, she refused to wait for her maids. She dressed herself and strode out into the mansion halls with undeniable energy. Staff and soldiers alike stopped and stared, stunned to see the bedridden princess moving with such vigor. Capitalizing on Emmerich and Marta's absence, Cordelia took absolute command of the estate. She calmly ordered the guards to escort her down to the city gates, wielding her authority as the highest-ranking noble in the region. Captivated by her radiant energy and gentle tone, the soldiers fell into step without hesitation. Marching out of the mansion doors, she prepared to crush this campaign of military harassment for good. As Princess Cordelia progressed through the streets of Halden, the townsfolk crowded around to cheer, begging her to preserve the peace. Reaching the town gate, she intercepted a returning scout clutching a letter from the Demon Territory drop point. Exercising her command, Cordelia broke the seal and found a formal summit request from Demon Lord Sereth Evergard. She agreed on the spot, drafting an immediate response and calling in local experts to prepare for the negotiations. A profound sense of duty drove her to use this temporary health to shield her sister Rosalind and the borderland citizens. 3 days later, Emmerich dragged himself back from the eastern mountains, only to discover the frail princess running the show. He balked at the news that she had intercepted the border missive and set up a diplomatic meeting single-handedly. The brutal realization hit him. He had utterly underestimated her. She was no sickly puppet, but a razor-sharp leader who had effortlessly outplayed both him and Marta. Furious, Emmerich commanded his troops to drop their search for the legendary sword and rush back to town to control the summit, terrified of what Cordelia might offer the Demon Lord while out of his sight. Back on the mountain, Mariella's excavation team finally shattered the chains binding the sword using enchanted axes. But the instant the metal snapped, the ancient blade dissolved into a pile of useless dust. Unbeknownst to the Empire, they had just triggered Rowan's newly upgraded security lock, a security feature that destroys the protected item if someone tampers with the lock. To the Imperial soldiers, it looked like a holy sword rejecting an unworthy master. While Emmerich planned to use the shattered blade as proof of Marta's failure, she plunged into despair. Breaking the seal on a hidden message from Minister Draven, she discovered his backup plan. Use Cordelia to hunt a dormant monster in the north and project Imperial strength. Back at the mansion, Cordelia confronted Emmerich. She commanded him to shift the military drills away from Civilian Road, wielding the Demon Lord's complaints as leverage. Confronted about her sudden recovery, she credited a surge of duty for her newfound strength. With the soldiers already rallied by her bold stance, Emmerich knew he could not simply suppress her. He yielded, but demanded a favor in return. Cordelia must help slaughter a beast in the northeastern forest immune to dark magic. Because the local demons struggled against the creature, taking it down would perfectly flaunt the Empire's holy light. Cordelia accepted without hesitation, desperate to conclude the mission before her vitality faded. Blind to the Imperial leadership's hidden agenda, she stepped right into their trap. Though trembling inside, she took on the deadly hunt for the sake of her people. Her resolve captivated the troops, backing Emmerich into the role of a loyal servant. Taking a knee, he vowed to obey her commands, all while plotting his deception. Despite the summit rules strictly limiting attendance to a single weapon, Emmerich prepared to strap countless hidden daggers and blades beneath his armor, anticipating chaos. Meanwhile, Sareth and her inner circle convened for their own war council. Knowing the Empire held no regard for the strict summit regulations, the demons opted to smuggle their gear inside Rowan's dimensional warehouse tool. They packed a UV-blocking parasol crafted by Rowan, capable of neutralizing nearly any light-based strike. Corvin noted that, armed with Rowan's laser pointers, their effective casting range vastly outstripped the Empire's, handing them a massive tactical edge. To keep Rowan safe from Imperial clutches, Corvin pitched an unorthodox strategy. He urged Rowan and Pym to fake a formal engagement. The Empire would inevitably try to drag their runaway back home. Tying him to a demon fiancé, however, would sever their legal claim. Sareth approved the ruse, recognizing it as the tightest shield for their human ally. Suppressing a sting of unexpected jealousy, she watched Rowan prepare for the summit. Inspecting the band Cordelia had gifted him, he gaped at the metal. It was forged from flawless, high-grade mithril. The princess had offered a far more genuine token of goodwill than he ever expected. Desperate to secure a lasting peace and open trade for the demon territory, he also hoped to buy Cordelia time to heal. Soon, the delegation arrived at the border forest clearing. General Falk commanded the main demon host to hold their ground at a safe distance, leaving only a tight core: Sareth, Corvin, Falk, and Rowan to step into the open and face the Imperial Princess. Right before leaving the tents, Pym grabbed Rowan by the shoulder. She meticulously smoothed out his wrinkled collar, ensuring he looked dignified for the royal summit. A fierce blush stained her cheeks. Corvin had just broadcast their fake engagement to ward off Imperial snatchers. Rowan promised her his loyalties lay firmly with the demons. He harbored no desire to return to his homeland. Sealing the promise, he pressed a handcrafted silver ring into a palm. He modeled the band on a rare, luck-boosting artifact from his magical catalog. Pym melted at the perfect fit, realizing Rowan had memorized her ring size the day they held hands. Taking his place alongside Sareth, Corvin, and Falk, Rowan marched toward the rendezvous. Across the grass, Princess Cordelia emerged, draped in a pristine white gown. Flanked by Emmerich Stauffer and another armored knight, she led a massive detachment of heavy cavalry. Radiating paranoia over his royal charge, Emmerich barked orders. He demanded a strict 10-meter gap for the parley. Refusing to shout, Rowan stepped into no man's land alone. Staring down his former countryman, Rowan knelt. Emmerich spat an insult, trying to brush the human off as a lowly translator. Cordelia snapped her guard into silence, intent on hearing Rowan's piece. Locking eyes with the princess, Rowan swore a deadly oath. If he lied about the demons seeking peace, she was welcome to burn him to ash with their strongest light magic. Struck by the raw conviction in his voice, Cordelia lowered her guard. Emmerich refused to back down, snarling threats. So Rowan planted a verbal trap. He smoothly mentioned the sacred sword that had crumbled into pieces under Emmerich's grip, hinting that a genuine hero wouldn't tremble at the thought of a simple conversation. Humiliated before his troops, the disgraced commander snapped his mouth shut. Cordelia turned that harsh lens on her own side, noting the demons brought only a handful of guards, while the Empire marched in with a full army. Grasping Rowan's hand, she let him guide her toward Sareth. The summit opened with Sareth and Cordelia addressing each other as equals. Cordelia wasted no time apologizing for the aggressive military drills and pledged to relocate them. Talk shifted to trade, exploring how the demon territory's fresh silver mines might supply the border town of Halden. Each leader found herself struck by the other's sheer wisdom and maturity. Emmerich and his imperial guards watched in stunned silence. They could hardly believe the once frail princess was now debating the demon lord with such commanding authority. Across the table, Kelvin Falk looked on with deep respect. He recognized that Cordelia was a far more capable ruler than anyone had guessed. Cordelia's sharp political mind shone through the negotiations, as she and Sareth drafted plans for a neutral trading post, easing human-demon tensions. As the summit dragged on, however, pale exhaustion crept back over Cordelia's face. Rowan noticed the healing effects of the footbath wearing off, leaving her fragile body to once again battle its own overwhelming light magic. Fighting through the fatigue, Cordelia dropped a stunning announcement. She declared her intent to become engaged to Rowan. This carried no romantic weight, serving instead as a calculated political shield to secure the peace. An engagement to a demon territory citizen, backed by Sareth, meant the Empire's high officials, especially the greedy Minister Draven, would find it nearly impossible to drag her home or force her into a political marriage elsewhere. To stay at the border and serve her people, she offered to become a mere concubine, or even erase her name from the royal records. Emmerich erupted in fury, trying to shut the summit down by claiming the princess was simply delirious from exhaustion. Stepping in to salvage the situation, Rowan suggested he and Cordelia take a private moment in a nearby tent. Sareth readily agreed, trusting Rowan completely, though she couldn't resist teasing him about his duties to her and Pym before waving them off. Once inside the tent, Rowan knew Emmerich would try peering in to spy on them. Ensuring absolute privacy required a new invention, the improved body pillow. By pouring their magic into the fabric covers, the cushions morphed into flawless physical doubles of Rowan and Cordelia. The decoys sat side by side, perfectly mimicking an intimate conversation. They moved their lips and shifted their weight naturally, fully deceiving anyone watching from the shadows outside. With the clones providing a flawless distraction, Rowan showed Cordelia the real secret. Opening a hidden hatch inside a common stool, he revealed a spatial warehouse, a miniaturized, comfortable chamber furnished with cozy chairs and a tea set. They ducked into the soundproof hidden shelter to speak freely about the border's future, entirely safe from the Empire's prying eyes. Down inside the simple warehouse, Rowan gave Cordelia a tour of the hidden space. Marveling at the technology, she revealed that her sister Rosalind had previously tried to recruit the alchemist who fixed her sword, completely unaware it was Rowan. He explained that, while the Empire treats alchemists like dirt, demon territory offered him a true purpose and a home. He then had Cordelia immediately sink her feet into the healing bath. While the magical vibration soothed her muscles, Rowan stated he would never hand this technology to the Empire. They would only use it to heal soldiers for an invasion against the demons. He confessed his desire to help her stemmed from shared pain. They both knew the sting of being tossed aside as useless by their own country. Cordelia admitted the gentle tone of his messenger owls earned her trust before they ever met face to face. Touched by his raw sincerity, she officially cemented their engagement. Rowan vowed to manage her health, proposing a trading post where she could visit for regular treatments. Then, shifting awkwardly, Cordelia shyly asks for more underwear. Because the magical garments turned transparent, she couldn't risk letting her maids wash them, forcing her to scrub them herself. Flushing at his own oversight, Rowan quickly promised to send a fresh batch. They struck a firm pact. If the Empire ever stripped away her royal title, she would always find a home in the demon territory as an ordinary civilian. Just as Rowan prepared to explain his UV-blocking parasol invention, Sareth's frantic shout pierced the tent. A sudden monster attack had shattered the peaceful summit. Nearby, sheer chaos reigned. Hours earlier, the Imperial official Marta ignored direct orders, leading a small squad to a mountain cave to bag a sleeping bear as a trophy for Minister Draven. Instead of a bear, they unearthed a nightmare. A massive, man-eating centipede stretching over 10 meters long. The beast had already devoured the local monster population, and it possessed a lethal sensitivity to sound. Panic struck, and Marta's men fled for their lives. During the frantic scramble, her horse snagged its hoof on a twisted tree root, launching Marta headfirst into a rushing river that swept her unconscious body away. Rowan's scout owl soon spotted one of Marta's surviving soldiers, who was rambling in pure shock about a giant worm. The owls guided the broken man back to the Imperial camp before speeding toward Warnthor. Outside the meeting tent, Sereth, Corvin, and Falk braced themselves for battle. They quickly deduced that these colossal centipedes belonged to a new, hyper-aggressive species migrating directly into their territory. Emmerich, meanwhile, seethed with fury upon learning that Marta's sheer incompetence had awakened the horde. With Marta missing downriver and the monstrous swarm closing the distance, the commander dropped his political schemes, ordering his troops into a desperate defensive line alongside the demons. Emmerich Stauffer hastily marshaled his ranks, pushing the heavy cavalry to the vanguard while infantry shielded the mages. He planted his feet, determined to break the monster wave before it could reach the town or spill into demon lands. He knew his rival Marta would take the blame for waking them. Princess Cordelia felt completely restored after Rowan's treatment. She insisted on shielding her people with her light magic. Before they rushed off, Rowan tried handing Cordelia a small coin-shaped item. Emmerich whisked her away before he could finish the exchange. Regrouping with Sareth and Pym, Rowan offered Sareth a disc-shaped alarm designed to blare when triggered. Sareth tucked it away, worrying the sudden noise might disorient the soldiers in the chaos of battle. She ordered him to the rear guard with Pym, making him swear not to chase after light magic with his parasol. Outlining a trap for the swift centipedes using his creations, Rowan turned to Maruki. Maruki agreed to smooth over the politics of the Empire witnessing this new technology. Shifting back from their owl forms, the returning pixies agreed to spring the trap. Marching toward the battlefield, they spotted the first monster. It was a colossal obsidian-shelled centipede, boasting 4 eyes and rock-crushing jaws. But the demon territory struck first. Guided by Rowan's laser pointers, Sareth's black flames slammed into the beast from afar, leaving the Imperial soldiers stunned. Emmerich signaled his mages to unleash their spells and launched a cavalry charge. The centipede moved with terrifying speed, scattering riders. Yet the troops managed to encircle it. Black chains suddenly rained down from the sky as the pixies soared overhead. Activating their landlock feature, the chains bit deep into the earth and immobilized the beast entirely. Emmerich recognized the same unbreakable restraints he had witnessed at the mountain. Soldiers rushed in to finish the trapped creature, but the earth beneath them began to heave. Scout reports flashed through Emmerich's mind, warning of multiple tunneling beasts. Just as the danger clicked, a third centipede erupted. This monster dwarfed the others, clearly the leader of the pack. It tore through the soil directly behind the vanguard. The beast locked straight onto the mages and Princess Cordelia. Emmerich shrieked for the demon army's aid as the monstrosity towered over the exposed princess. Earlier, Rowan had met with the pixies returning from their owl-form scouting run. He laid out a strategy utilizing his new inventions to help Sareth and Cordelia crush the monsters. While Pym kept a tight grip on one of Rowan's disc-shaped buzzers, the rest of the group pushed toward the front lines to reinforce the soldiers. Over at the Imperial front, Emmerich Stauffer watched the first gargantuan centipede barrel toward them. The monstrosity was a nightmare of obsidian armor and scrambling legs. Clearly an undocumented species. Despite the mounting dread, the Imperial soldiers held their ground, bolstered by Princess Cordelia's presence. Emmerich ordered his mages and cavalry forward, but the demon forces struck first. Sareth unleashed devastating black flames that crossed a staggering distance, striking the monster before it even reached the Imperial lines. Combat exploded as mages hurled spells and cavalry slammed into the fray. Darting through the magical artillery, the centipede plowed into the riders, hurling soldiers from their mounts. Just as the beast appeared unstoppable, the pixies swooped low, releasing heavy black chains. Pulsing with magic, the restraints coiled around the creature, anchoring it firmly to the earth. Spotting the trapped beast, Emmerich and his men surged forward for the kill. Glancing over, he saw the Demon Lord's forces already shredding the second centipede. Without warning, the soil beneath Emmerich's boots shuddered violently. The horrifying truth of the scout reports dawned on him. There were more than 2 monsters. A third centipede, doubling the size of the others and clearly the alpha, ruptured the earth. Tunneling past the vanguard, it breached the surface right at the feet of the unprotected Princess Cordelia. The erupting dirt violently threw Emmerich's horse to the ground, and in sheer desperation he screamed for the demon army to save the princess. Once the battle ended and the monsters were finally cleared out, the combined forces marched northeast toward the forest where the beasts had spawned. They soon discovered Imperial soldiers trespassing in the territory had agitated the swarm. During the march, General Falk fumbled and accidentally triggered Rowan's buzzer. The device instantly screamed AMA Warrison, the new name Emmerich had adopted. Thinking he was being summoned, Emmerich sprinted over in a panic, which triggered an incredibly awkward round of apologies from Rowan and the general. Rowan quickly realized he needed a different design for the princess, one that wouldn't drag Emmerich across the camp. Arriving at the base of a sheer rock wall, the group stared down into the monster's cavernous den. Emmerich suggested forming a joint team of demon experts and Imperial soldiers to uncover the origin of this new species. Sareth agreed, and they quickly assembled a joint search party. Hoping his alchemy skills might reveal some hidden clues, Rowan volunteered to delve into the cave. Before heading inside, Rowan had the pixies sweep the cavern for magic, and they uncovered traces of dark earth and water magic, though they didn't detect any more massive beasts lurking within. Taking no chances, Rowan and Pym ventured into the tunnel alongside General Falk and a small escort. The pixies stuck close, masquerading as little cats perched on their shoulders to serve as hidden bodyguards, while the group stepped into the pitch black. The tunnel ran down at a shallow angle for the first 100 paces, and then it stopped pretending to be a tunnel. Something had widened it from the inside, and recently enough that the dust had not settled back. The walls were smooth where broken rock should have been, scraped flat by a body far larger than whatever first opened the passage. Holding a low flame in his palm, Falk kept it low, and nobody asked him to make it brighter. Rowan walked with one hand flat against the rock, reading it the way he had spent his whole life reading a cut stem. Whetstone tells you where the water comes from, and this stone told him it came from nowhere at all. There was no spring under this hill, and he said so aloud so the soldiers behind him would stop looking for one. Pym went ahead of him without being asked, the way she had gone ahead of him for 2 years. Unfolding out of the shape of a cat, Tilda shook herself into a pixie again and hovered level with his ear. The traces got stronger the deeper they went, she told him, and they were braided rather than tangled. Dark earth had been laid down first, and water threaded through it after, the two working together instead of eating each other. Magic does not braid itself. Stopping at a bend, Falk let his flames swell just enough to show them the floor ahead, and then wished he had not. The chamber beyond was full of shells. They lay in drifts against the walls, curved and split open from the inside, dry as autumn leaves and thin enough to crush underfoot. Counting the unbroken ones took Rowan 4 minutes before he gave up at 90, because the chamber went back further than the light did. Every shell had been opened from within, which meant nothing down here had been killed in its egg. Kneeling in the drift, he turned one over and found the inner face glazed smooth, the way a good pot is glazed. No living thing glazes its own shell, and he said so twice before anybody answered him. Asking the question the soldiers were too disciplined to ask, Pym wanted to know whether a nest could look like this by itself. It could not, and Rowan told her so before he had finished working out how he knew it. A wild brood scatters, because a mother that lays in one heap loses the whole heap to a single flood. This brood had been stacked in rows, sorted by depth, with the oldest shells at the back of the chamber. Somebody had been managing it the way a farmer manages a field. And a farmer does not manage a field he means to leave alone. Falk said a word in the old tongue that his daughter would have been fined for saying. The escort spread along the wall the way soldiers do when they have nothing to fight and no way to leave. Coming down off Tim's shoulder, Lumi sat on a shell, and the light off her went thin and hard, the way it always did when she was frightened. She told them the water trace was freshest at the back of the chamber, and that from there it went down. Following the freshest trace meant walking away from the only exit. And every soldier understood that before Rowan said they were doing it anyway. The back of the chamber narrowed into a throat of stone barely wide enough for Falk's shoulders. Beyond it, the floor changed, and the change was the thing that decided the rest of the year. It was flat, not worn flat by bellies dragging over it for a season, but cut flat, with the tool marks still legible where the damp had not eaten them. Rowan put both palms on the floor and stayed down long enough that Pym crouched beside him to see what he was seeing. A shallow gutter ran the whole length of the cut floor, dropping perhaps a hand's width over 30 paces. At the low end of it there was a basin, and in the basin, a finger of standing water that had no business surviving a summer underground. Water magic keeps water where water does not want to stay. And it does it badly unless somebody comes back to renew it. Somebody had renewed this one within the month. Flying the length of the gutter and back, Tilda reported that the dark earth trace ran under the whole floor like a root system. It fed up into the basin from below, which was the braid. And the braid was the part that could not be an accident. Dark earth to make the ground hold what it should have swallowed. Water to keep the brood wet through the dry season. The two of them had been woven together so the pair would not unravel while the eggs matured. Rowan sat back on his heels and said the sentence nobody in the chamber wanted to be first to say. These monsters had been farmed. Asking how sure he was, Falk got the truth, which was that Rowan had been sure since the shells. He had spent the 20 minutes since then trying to talk himself out of it and had not managed it. The general did not argue, because he had spent 40 years in the field and had never once seen a nest sorted by age. Pym found the crate wedged behind the basin under a fall of loose rock. It was imperial oak, and it had been emptied and left because carrying an empty crate out of a cave is work nobody does. The brand on the lid had been chiseled off badly and in a hurry by somebody who did not know how oak behaves. Wood keeps the shadow of a brand in the grain long after the surface is gone, and this wood had kept it. Rowan did not touch the crate. He put his face close to the grain and looked at it the way he looked at everything, and then asked Falk to hold the flame still. Standing up afterwards with his hands very carefully at his sides, he said they were leaving now. Nobody was to move the crate, and the entrance needed 2 guards who could be trusted not to talk to their friends. Falk gave those orders without asking for reasons, which was the moment Rowan understood he had been promoted from a curiosity to a colleague. The walk back up took half the time, because going up you already know the shape of the passage. At the mouth of the cave, the daylight was frankly insulting after all that dark. Sareth was waiting on the rock above the entrance with her arms folded, having refused to sit down for an hour and a half. She looked at Rowan's face and did not trouble to ask whether he had found anything. The joint camp had been pitched in the open, because neither army trusted a tree line it had not personally walked. Demon tents stood on the north side and Imperial on the south, with a wide trampled strip between them. Everybody crossed that strip a dozen times a day, and nobody admitted to crossing it once. Asking for the crate to be brought up after dark and on a demon cart, Rowan had both halves agreed by Sereth without a question. Arriving at the command tent before the cart did, Corvin was early, the way Corvin was always early. Listening to the whole account with his hands behind his back, the Chancellor asked exactly one question at the end of it. He asked whether the shadow in the grain could be read by anybody other than Rowan. It could not. And that answer changed the meeting, and everyone in the tent felt it change. Evidence only one man can read is not evidence, Corbin said. It is a claim. A claim of this kind, made against the Empire by a demon court, is not a trial, but a war. Saying he was aware of that, Rowan explained why he had left the crate where it lay and brought back nothing but a description. Emmerich had been standing against the tent wall, trying not to occupy space. And it was Emmerich who said the useful thing. He said that Imperial Oak is stamped twice, not once. Once on the lid, where the quartermaster can see it, and once inside the end board, where the Cooper marks his batch. The second mark never gets chiseled off, because nobody outside of Cooperage knows that it is there. Falk laughed for the first time in 3 days, and had to be asked twice to stop. They went back down at first light with a demon smith and an Imperial Cooper's apprentice, who had been conscripted as a spearman. 4 witnesses came with them, chosen so that neither side could later claim the other had invented the result. The end board came away whole. The batch mark was intact, and beside it sat a house mark. And the house mark did not belong to the Empire. It belonged to a private household holding a warrant to buy from Imperial stores. Reading a house mark is not alchemy, but heraldry, and 2 people in that cave could do it. The Cooper's apprentice went gray and said nothing. Emmerich went pale and said the name. He had decided some months earlier that he was finished being the kind of man who waits to be asked. Draven, Minister of Military Affairs, holder of a household warrant, and the man who had spent a year moving Imperial units along the northern border. He had done it the way a child arranges soldiers on a table. And until that morning, everybody had assumed it was ordinary ambition. Nobody in the cave said anything for a while after the name had been said out loud. Rowan sat down on the flat-cut floor and laid the pieces out where he could see them. A minister does not breed monsters for the pleasure of it. He breeds them where they will hatch on ground he intends to have blamed, and then arranges for a unit to be standing there when they do. The centipedes had not come up under the border by accident. They had been aimed. Pym asked the question that made it worse, which was who exactly they had been aimed at. Rowan had to admit that both answers fitted the evidence equally well. Aimed at the demon army, they justified an Imperial war of defense and a march north in the spring. Aimed at the Imperial column, they justified an Imperial war of revenge instead. And the column at the impact point had been Emmerich's. That column had been posted to that stretch of border by Draven, personally, in writing, 4 months earlier. Sitting very still on an upturned crate, Emmerich worked out that he had been sent north to die usefully. The only reason he had not was that a demon army he had been raised to hate reached the princess before the Alpha did. He did not say a word of that aloud. Asking in a level voice what proof would be enough, he got the truth from Corvin, which was that a house mark proves a crate and not a man. Any minister with a warrant can claim a servant sold his crates on, and any minister with Draven's reach can produce that servant. The servant will be hanged by then and in no position to disagree with the account. What they needed was a person who had stood in that forest, watched the handover, and lived through the rest of it. Rowan asked who had been in the woods before the swarm woke. The answer came from an Imperial sergeant at the back, who had spent the whole conversation deciding whether to speak. An adjutant had ridden in ahead of the column with 4 men, on the minister's own written order, 3 days before anything hatched. Marta. The sergeant gave her name and then gave the rest of it, which was that she had gone into the river when the ground opened. She had been entered in the roll as missing rather than dead, and the distinction had seemed pedantic at the time. Asking how far downstream anybody had searched, Rowan was told the search had been called off after a single afternoon. It had been called off on the minister's own instruction, relayed by a rider who had not stayed to explain it. That was the first thing all day that made Sereth smile, and it was not a pleasant smile to stand near. A man who calls off a search after one afternoon is not a man who believes the body is close by. He is a man who is afraid that it is alive somewhere and talking. Having a map out before the sentence had finished, Corvin spread it, and Falk had a finger on the river before it lay flat. The water ran northeast out of the forest, and through a gorge nobody would survive. Then out into slow farmland. Down there, it braided across 3 villages that paid tax to nobody in particular and preferred it that way. 50 miles, and Rowan said he would go, and 4 people said no at the same moment. Sareth said the loudest no of all and repeated it twice. He waited for them to finish and then pointed out the flaw in every objection at once. A search party of soldiers would arrive in a border village looking exactly like the thing that village was hiding somebody from. An alchemist with a mule and 2 packs of medicine, by contrast, is a man that villages come out onto the road to meet. Pim said she was going with him and did not phrase it as a request. They left before dawn with a mule, 2 packs of medicine, and no escort at all, which cost Sareth more than she let anybody see. Corbin had wanted 6 guards in plain clothes, and Rowan had asked him a single question. Asking what 6 fit young men with straight backs and no farm calluses would look like, he left the Chancellor to picture them entering a village of 90 people. The Chancellor conceded the point, and visibly hated conceding it. Riding on the packs as cats, Tilda and Lumi had both learned to sleep in that shape by the second morning. Neither of them would admit at any point that it was comfortable. The road out of the highlands took 2 days, and the weather turned kind, which felt like an insult given the errand. The first village had 40 houses and a mill, and knew nothing. And Rowan spent the whole afternoon there anyway. He set a farmer's shoulder and drew the rod out of a well with a handful of charcoal and river clay. Leaving a jar of burn salve with a woman whose oven door did not shut properly, he took no payment for any of it. Asking him about it afterwards, Pim wanted to know why he had spent 6 hours in a village he already knew was the wrong one. Because the right village is 2 hours downriver, he said, and it will hear about us before we get there. News travels along a river considerably faster than a mule does. What it carries is not the truth, but the shape of the truth. 2 strangers, no soldiers, and a man who fixed a well for nothing. The second village had a bridge and a shrine, and a headman who came out to meet them on the road with his hands where they could be seen. He was polite for a very long time. Asking where they had come from, he went on to where they were going, and then to how long they meant to stay. Each answer he received made him slightly less relaxed than the answer before it had. Rowan did not ask him about the river. Asking instead about the fields, which were poor, he moved on to the fish, which were fewer than last year. By evening, he had traced both complaints to a silt bar that had shifted in the spring floods. 20 men who understood why they were digging could cut through it in a week, and he drew them the line to dig on. The headman fed them that night. Halfway through the meal, Pim put her cup down and used the flat, friendly voice she kept for when she had decided to stop being careful. She said they were looking for a woman the river had brought down about 3 weeks ago. The room went very quiet, and Rowan let it stay quiet. A silence that long is already an answer, and pushing on it would only have given the man something to deny. He said instead that if such a woman existed, she would have a fever by now. River water carries what river water carries, and a wound taken in a forest does not close cleanly in a fisherman's shed. Setting it out plainly, he said he had a bag of medicine, no soldiers, and no interest whatsoever in anybody's tax arrangements. Then he said that if no such woman existed, he would like to look at the headman's daughter's hand. It had been bandaged badly, by somebody in a hurry, and it was going to go wrong within the week. The headman looked at his daughter's hand for a long moment. Sending the boys out of the room first, he told them about the fish weir. Coming down on the 3rd night after the storm, she had fouled the weir, and 2 of them had hauled her out, believing they were recovering a corpse. She had been imperial, in a uniform coat with the insignia already cut off, which told the village she had done the cutting herself. That, more than anything else, was why they had kept her. A soldier still wearing her marks belongs to somebody, and somebody eventually comes looking for her. A soldier who has cut them off is running, and the people who come looking for a runner are not people a village of 90 wants to meet. Putting her in the smokehouse had been simple enough, because it was dry and warm and nobody had any reason to open it. Rowan asked how bad, and was told that she had stopped talking after the first week. Marta had a broken collarbone that had knitted crooked, and a river wound along the ribs that had closed over dirt. The fever came up every evening like a tide and went down again before dawn, and it had been doing that for 19 days. She was conscious when they came in with a lamp, and she reached for a knife she no longer had. Then she understood that neither of the people in the doorway was a soldier, and her hand stopped halfway. Pim sat down on the floor 3 paces away, which is closer than a stranger sits and further off than a captor stands. Rowan did not tell her who he was. Telling her first, he said he was going to open the rib wound because it had closed over dirt, and that it would hurt worse than the original had. He said she could tell him to stop at any point and he would stop. And then he did exactly that. She told him to stop twice, and he stopped twice. And both times he started again, only when she said so. The whole business took 2 hours. Working with her ribs open under a fish oil lamp, he He talked the entire time about nothing whatsoever. Talking about mules, he went on to a chancellor who ironed his own collars, and then to a general who had once set his beard alight trying to be polite. By the end of it, she was laughing, which tore something, which made her swear, which made her laugh again. He set the collarbone the next morning, which meant breaking it first, and he told her that before he touched her. On the third day, she asked who he was, and he told her the truth in one sentence, and let her have as long as she needed with it. Reading reports on the alchemist for 8 months, she had also helped her minister draft 2 separate plans for taking him. Lying still and looking at the roof of the smokehouse, she said nothing at all for most of an hour. Then she said that she had watched the handover herself. 2 carts at the forest edge, 4 days before the hatch, with the minister's own household guard out of livery. The crates had gone down the slope on ropes, and she had been ordered to record the count, and she had recorded it. The tally slate was still in her saddlebag, and her horse had bolted west rather than into the river. Asking the only question that mattered, Rowan wanted to know whether she would say all of that in front of a demon court and an imperial one. Marta said that a month ago she would have died first, and then said the rest of it without being asked. A month ago, she had been a woman who thought a dormant monster was an opportunity, and that woman had drowned in the gorge. She was not, on reflection, especially sorry about it. Pim went out to the yard and was quietly sick, because she had spent 3 weeks preparing to hate this person. They came back with Marta on a litter and a village escort of 6 men who refused payment and would not explain why they were coming. The camp had grown a good deal while they were gone. An imperial column had arrived from the south with supply wagons, a field chapel, and 200 men. Those men had been told they were reinforcing a border, and were now discovering that they were sharing a valley with demons. Cordelia had ridden out to meet the column, because somebody had to. She was also the only person on the imperial side whom the demon court would not insult by ignoring. It went well for 4 days. On the 5th day, the column's herald read out the standing announcements from the capital, as heralds do, in a clear, carrying voice. He did it in the middle of a shared camp at the noon meal, with both armies in earshot. Coming to the 3rd announcement, he congratulated the Demon Lord's court on the betrothal of the alchemist, Rowan Ambrose, to a lady of the demon household. Corvin's broadcast had taken 9 weeks to reach the imperial capital, and 4 days to come back out of it as an official notice. Standing beside a cart with an armful of bandages, Pim heard it and did not move for several seconds. The 4th announcement conveyed the 3rd Princess Cordelia's intention to enter an engagement of state with the same man. The herald read it in exactly the same voice as the 3rd, because heralds do not editorialize. There followed a silence of a quality Rowan had never heard before, and never heard again. Falk broke it by laughing so hard that he had to sit down on a water barrel, and the barrel did not survive the experience. Emmerich went the color of a boiled shirt and stared fixedly at the middle distance. Sereth, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, turned around and walked away without a word. Corvin watched her go with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing at all. Having been 2 days on a mule with a wounded witness on a litter behind him, Rowan said the only thing in his head. He said that he had not agreed to either of them. It was true, and it was also the worst possible sentence to say in front of 200 imperial soldiers. He understood both of those facts about a heartbeat too late to do anything about either. Cordelia saved it. Stepping out in front of the herald, she thanked him for his diligence and announced that the capital had transposed 2 lines. The capital does that constantly, she said, and the correct reading was an engagement of state between the Empire and the Demon Court. She and the lady in question were both signatories to it, and the alchemist was the subject of the 4th clause rather than the 1st. None of this was remotely true. It was delivered so calmly and in such a carrying voice that the herald wrote it down and the column believed it. 200 men went back to their supper entirely satisfied. Pim said afterwards that she had never in her life watched anybody lie that well. Cordelia said it was not lying, it was drafting, and that her sister had been doing it to her since they were 9. The 2 of them sat up that night with a jug of something the demon quartermaster should not have had. By morning, they had a written agreement of 4 clauses, 3 of which were nonsense, and 1 of which held. The clause that held said neither would allow the other to be used as a shield without being told first. Rowan was not consulted about any of it, and had the sense not to ask to be. Marta was set up in a tent under demon guard with an imperial officer present at all hours. That was Corvin's arrangement, so that nobody could later claim she had been coached into her account. Taking her statement across 3 days with 2 clerks writing in parallel, the chancellor never once raised his voice. The tally slates came in on the 6th day, carried up by a farmer who had caught her horse in a barley field 40 miles west. He had kept the saddlebag because throwing it away had seemed wrong to him. He refused a reward and asked instead whether the alchemist could look at his wife's eyes. Rowan looked at his wife's eyes and could do nothing for them. and said so plainly. Refusing to send her away with a hopeful jar of colored water, he was thanked by the farmer for it. He thanked him more warmly, in fact, than most of the men he had actually cured ever had. By the end of that week, they had a witness, a tally, a house mark, and a crate. Corvin said for the first time that this was no longer a claim, but a case. Then Cordelia collapsed in the command tent, between one sentence and the next, and did not come round for 9 minutes. Reaching her before the Imperial physician did, Rowan had been standing closer, and he had also seen this before. The light was pooled in her chest and shoulders, and it was not moving anywhere at all. He had watched exactly this in a pixie the size of his forearm, in a forest, 2 years and 1 entire lifetime ago. Dying of her own magic at the time, Lumi had a frame far too fine to carry the amount she had been born with. It had taken him 4 months and 11 failed garments to learn how to move it instead of storing it. Cordelia was not a pixie. She was a grown woman with the light output of a cathedral and a body that had been failing to carry it since childhood. Every physician in the Empire had spent 20 years treating the symptoms of that with rest and quiet rooms. Rowan asked how long the fainting had been going on for. Rosalind, who had ridden in with the second column 2 hours earlier and had not yet been announced to anybody, answered from the doorway. She said 11 years. The third princess of Valdren came into the tent still in her riding armor, having heard about her sister from a groom in the horse lines. Crossing to the cot, she put 2 fingers to Cordelia's throat with the competence of somebody who has done it on a battlefield. Only then did she look up at the man kneeling on the other side of it. She had been hunting him for a year. Every report she had commissioned described a wandering alchemist of no fixed household, and everyone had been written by somebody paid by the page. None of those writers had ever laid eyes on him, which she had suspected and had gone on paying for anyway. Building a picture out of those pages, Rosalind had arrived at older, sly, and expensive. The kind of craftsman who has to be leveraged rather than asked. What she got instead was a thin young man with river mud still on his boots, holding her sister's wrist and counting under his breath. She did not recognize him at first, and that was the part she would be angriest about afterwards. It took the buzzer to do it. Falk came through the tent flap at a run and set the thing off against the pole by accident. It screamed AMA Warrison across the tent, and Emmerich arrived 4 seconds later at a dead sprint with his sword belt in one hand. Watching a captain of the Imperial Guard skid to a halt in front of an alchemist's toy, Rosalind laughed exactly once. The sound of her own laugh stopped her dead, because she had heard that name somewhere before. Not the ridiculous one, the other one, the family one, the name that had gone through the Valdren court 18 months earlier. It had been attached at the time to the phrase, useless second son. She looked at him properly for the first time since walking in. Rowan Kessler had been presented at court when she was 15, and had stood through the whole afternoon without saying anything memorable. He had been written off by everybody in the room that day, including, she remembered with great precision, by her. Rowan Ambrose was the same face, with 2 years of somewhere else laid over it. The sword came up out of her memory next, which was worse. A blade repaired in a border town by a man who would not give a name returned to her with a seam so fine that her armorer refused to believe it. He had spent an hour insisting the thing had never been broken at all, and had been offended when she proved otherwise. She had kept that sword. Riding 400 miles with it, she had been looking for the man who fixed it, meaning to compel him into her service. Her argument had been that a talent of that order belongs to the crown and should not be left wandering about in border towns. Standing in a tent that smelled of fever and fish oil, Rosalind understood that the crown had already had him. It had thrown him away, and she had personally been in the room on the afternoon it happened. She said none of this to anybody, then or later. Asking what was wrong with her sister, she got an answer from Rowan in language that did not spare her at all. The light was not a gift Cordelia had failed to use properly through weakness of will, whatever 11 years of court physicians had gently implied. It was a load her frame could not carry. It had been building since she was a child, and rest did not help. Rest is not drainage, he said, and everything they had done for her since she was 9 had been rest. Rosalind asked whether it could be moved. Saying yes, Rowan then said the rest of it because he had learned 2 years ago that the second half is the half that matters. Moving it required a vessel. Light does not simply disperse when you open a way for it. It goes somewhere, and the somewhere has to be alive. It also has to be able to hold a load that has already broken one person, which narrows the field considerably. The demon court had a room full of people with enormous magic, and not one thread of light among them. Lumi was light and weighed about as much as a cup of water. Rosalind said that she would do it. Speaking before Rowan had finished the sentence, she used the flat voice of somebody who has already decided and is waiting on the paperwork. Cordelia, who had been awake for most of the conversation, told her to be quiet. The two of them argued for 11 minutes without once raising their voices. It was the first genuinely private thing anybody in that camp had witnessed between the twins. Everyone present found somewhere else to look while continuing to listen with total attention. Rosalind's case was that she was the strong one and had been born expressly to be spent. Cordelia's case was that her sister had been spending herself since they were 9 and had never once been asked to. She was not going to be permitted to buy a life with the only thing she had never learned to value. Ending it, Rowan told them both that the argument was moot because Rosalind could not hold the load either. Fire, storm, and steel, he said, and not one thread of light anywhere in her. Putting a light load into a body with no light in it is not a transfer. It is simply a wound with extra steps. Asking the obvious question then, Rosalind used a tone suggesting she already knew the answer and wanted to hear him refuse to give it. She asked who could hold it. Rowan said that he did not know yet, which was true at that moment and stopped being true about 9 hours later. He spent those 9 hours in the Demon Smith's tent with every book he owned, and Pym brought him 3 meals he did not eat. The answer, when it came out of the pixies. Lumi could not carry her own light, and yet she had carried it for 20 years without dying, and the reason was a dress. Weaving it 2 summers ago, he had made something that moved her magic through her instead of letting it settle anywhere. The dress had never made her stronger. It had made her a channel rather than a vessel, and a channel does not need to be strong, only continuous. Rowan sat back and understood what he was going to have to do, and understood the price of it about a minute afterwards. He did not tell anybody for 3 days. Drain's answer arrived before the case against him did, which surprised nobody who had read Marta's statement. A minister with a warrant hears things, and hears them early. On the 9th night, the northern picket saw the tree line move, and by the time the horns went, the ground under the horse lines was lifting. There were 4 of them, smaller than the Alpha had been, but coming up under a camp instead of out in an open field. They came up in the space between the demon tents and the imperial ones, where the ground had been trampled softest by a fortnight of crossing. Whoever had released the last brood had taken the trouble to study the camp first. The first hour was the worst hour of Emmerich Stauffer's life, and he had been at the border when the Alpha came up under his horse. Holding the eastern gap alone for 11 minutes, Ilsa did it with her helmet off and her control entirely gone. The grass burned in a ring around her that the demons afterwards would not walk across, out of something very close to reverence. Falk lost the use of his left arm and did not notice it until well into the 2nd hour. Spending the whole night in the smith's tent, Rowan was seen by every soldier who ran past it as an alchemist hiding. Not one of them said so afterwards, then or ever. He was not hiding. The chain lock had been sitting in the back of his head since the cave, because the cave floor had been cut and channeled. Whoever cut it had understood that the way to hold a thing which lives in the ground is to hold the ground itself. A chain lock fuses to bedrock. It cannot be lifted unless you can lift the planet. It cannot be picked, and it answers to exactly one magic signature. That is why the demon treasuries had used them for 400 years and had never once lost a vault. Nobody had ever made one that was not a lock, because nobody had ever needed a lock that closed on a body. Rowan made 40 of them. Working with 6 demon smiths and every scrap of black iron in 2 armies, he built them short and crude and identical. Each one was a fused anchor, 3 feet of heavy chain, and a hook that shut on a living thing instead of a door. They were ugly. They were the ugliest objects he had ever made, and he had never in his life been prouder of anything. The signature was the problem, and the answer to the problem had been standing behind him for an hour waiting to be asked. Sereth had a black flame signature that every demon in the north could recognize from a mile off. Setting 40 anchors to one signature meant every chain in that field would answer to her and to nobody else. That included the man who had made them, which was the part he made sure to say out loud. Asking her permission in front of witnesses, Rowan did it the way you ask when handing somebody a weapon that cannot be taken back. She gave it in front of the same witnesses and did not make him ask twice. Then he had to get 40 anchors under 4 burrowing monsters in the dark. And that was where the pixies came in. Pixies cannot fly on their own. They fly because their garments channel magic. And a garment that channels magic is a garment somebody wove for them. There were 19 pixies in that camp, and every one of them had been dressed by the same pair of hands. Cutting 19 harnesses out of the same cloth in 90 minutes, Rowan did not stop once to check a measurement. Each harness carried one chain, and each pixie flew low, and each dropped her anchor into soft ground above a moving body. They did it while the thing underneath was still deciding where to surface, which gave them perhaps 4 seconds each. The first anchor fused at 2:15 in the morning. The chain went taut, the ground held it, and 11 feet of armored centipedes stopped dead, half out of the earth. Its front third whipped and screamed, and its back third stayed locked into bedrock that it could not lift. Flying back for the second chain, Tilda laughed the entire way, which the demon soldiers found deeply unsettling and never forgot. By 4 in the morning, all 4 of them were pinned. Walking down the line with Black Flame in one hand, Sereth finished them one at a time, without hurry. 2 armies watched her do it and learned what she looked like when she was not being diplomatic. The Imperial Column had just seen a demon lord save their camp with a tool made by their own discarded noblemen. Something in 200 men rearranged itself that night and did not rearrange back. Dawn came up on a field of chains, standing in the middle of it with his hands shaking from 19 hours of fine work. Rowan looked at what he had built. Coming to stand beside him, Corvin said nothing at all for a good while. Then the Chancellor said that this was the weapon, and Rowan said that it was a tent peg. Explaining it back to him, Corvin used the patience of a man explaining water to a fish. He had promised his lord a masterwork that would surpass the ancient heroes, and the ancient heroes had all brought swords. Every one of those swords had eventually been used on somebody who did not deserve it. Usually within a generation. A chain that holds a thing in place cannot be pointed at a city. It was the first time in 2 years that Rowan had heard his own work explained back to him by somebody who understood it better than he did. Coming for the formal presentation at noon, Sereth made it as ridiculous as she possibly could. She had noticed he was flinching under the ceremony, and she accepted the anchors as the promised masterwork in front of everybody. Then she asked him, with a completely straight face, whether the great artifact came in other colors, and Falk had to leave the tent. The chain that mattered, though, was not any of the 40. It was the one he had been carrying since 3 in the morning, when he finally admitted to himself what a channel is for. Telling them on the morning of the 3rd day, he did it in the command tent, with everybody in it who had a right to argue. It took him 4 minutes to explain, and it took the room another 20 to stop shouting. The mechanism itself was not complicated. Cordelia's light had to leave her along a path that stayed open, and only one thing in 2 armies could be that path. It had to be somebody who had spent 2 years learning to hold 4 elements at once without letting any of them settle. Pseudo-life grasp is a skill of touch. It had come to him in a workshop through his hands, from fire and water and earth and light. One living contact at a time. It lived in his hands the way a musician's timing lives in theirs, and it could not be moved somewhere safer. Running a cathedral's worth of stagnated light through that skill would not kill him. It would use it up. Rowan said the last part in the flattest voice he could manage. The load would move, Cordelia would stand up, and the fine sense in his hands would be spent doing it. Asking what that meant in practice, Ilsa was the only person in the room who worked with her hands for a living. It meant he would still know everything that he knew. He would still design, still read a plant, still see the shape in a piece of oat grain, still tell a smith where a weld had failed. He would not draw thread through a pixie's harness, or set a seam a hair wide, or feel the moment a stem gives under the blade. The work would have to be done by other hands with his eyes over them for the rest of his life. Sereth said no. She said it as a sovereign, which meant it was an order rather than an opinion, and the tent went quiet for it. Rowan pointed out with enormous care that he had never been her subject, and that she had spent 2 years being proud of that. Corvin said nothing whatsoever and looked at the tent wall. Refusing outright, Cordelia kept refusing for the better part of an hour. She stopped when Rowan asked her how many years she thought she had left, and she declined to answer the question. Rosalind said 1 sentence in the entire discussion. She asked him whether he would do it for a woman who was not a princess, and he said yes without pausing to think. Turning to her sister, she said that settled it, and there was nothing further to discuss. And there was not. Pym did not argue at all. She went out and came back an hour later with her sleeves already rolled up. She said that if his hands were going to be spent, then she would have to become good enough to be worth them. Then she asked when her training started, and Rowan said tomorrow and had to look away for a moment. They did it in a tent with the sides rolled up so that both armies could see there was no trick in it. That had been Corvin's condition, and it was a good one, and nobody argued with it either. Giving fire with her gauntlets off and her hands open, Ilsa did not burn him. A demon water mage gave water, and Falk gave the dark earth of his own bloodline. Offering it took the general about 90 seconds of pride, and he offered it, and never afterwards mentioned that it had cost him anything. Lumi gave light, sitting on Rowan's wrist, weighing nothing, having waited 2 years to give this man something back. Cordelia gave nothing at all. She lay still and let herself be opened, which for a woman who had managed every single thing about her own body for 11 years was the hardest part of it. The whole operation took 40 minutes. Feeling the load come up out of her chest as a slow, heavy warmth, Rowan felt it reach his wrists. Somewhere around the 20th minute, it stopped being warmth and started being weight, and he did not let go. By the 30th minute, his fingers had stopped reporting anything at all. He had to watch his own hands to know where they were, and he held the channel open by the memory of shape rather than by feel. Standing behind him, Pim held his shoulders for the last 10 minutes so that he would not drift sideways off the stool. Then it was over, and the light was moving, and it was going to go on moving through him for the rest of his life. It would run out into the ground quietly, the way a river runs, and it would never need to be opened again. Cordelia sat up on her own. Standing up about a minute later, she put her weight on her own feet without holding anything and looked around the tent. It was full of people who had never once in their lives seen her do that. She was crying and did not appear to have noticed that she was. Lumi went straight up off Rowan's wrist and hit the tent roof. The light that had been dammed across the whole system, and hers had been thin for 2 years for reasons nobody had ever traced. 19 pixies went up after her within about 4 seconds. 2 armies outside saw 19 small figures come out of a tent roof into the afternoon sun, going almost vertically. The sound that came out of 2,000 men was not exactly a cheer. Rowan sat on the floor with his hands in his lap and could not feel the fabric of his own trousers. Looking up at Pim, he said in a perfectly ordinary voice that they would start on the harness thread in the morning. Lumi's would need reweaving now at the new load, he said, and Pim said yes, and did not cry until she had left the tent. The case went south with an escort of 40 men and came back 6 weeks later as a summons. Riding to the capital voluntarily, Marta did the thing every lawyer in the empire told her was insane. Testifying for 6 days, she stood in front of a court that had been assembled to acquit a minister. The tally slate did most of the work. Draven's defense was the one Corvin had predicted almost word for word. A dishonest steward, crates sold on, a household betrayed from within. It survived until the Cooper's mark. A house mark on a lid can be explained away. A batch mark inside an end board cannot. It was cross-referenced against a cooperage ledger in a town the minister had never visited in his life. That ledger had been sitting on a shelf for 11 months while everybody involved looked for something more impressive. He was stripped in the 8th week. He was not executed, which disappointed a great many people, and which Corvin had argued against on flatly practical ground. A hanged minister becomes a martyr, he said, while a stripped one becomes an example that walks around in public. Marta was offered a pardon and refused it. She said a pardon implied she had been forgiven for something, and that what she had done was change sides. She would rather be a witness with a record than a cleared woman with a lie in her file. And she said so to the court. She took a post on the Joint Border Commission instead, at half her old salary, working directly for Emmerich. The engagements were dissolved by mutual embarrassment over the course of a single afternoon. Signing a genuine treaty instead, Cordelia put her name to 11 clauses, none of which involved marrying anybody at all. The Valdrin court accepted it because the alternative was explaining the 2,000 soldiers why the demons who saved their camp were enemies again. Pim's engagement ended with Corvin issuing a correction that nobody anywhere read. She did not mention it for 4 days, and then mentioned it exactly once, at the workbench, with her eyes on her work. Rowan said the wrong thing, and then said a considerably better thing about an hour later. What happened after that was nobody's business but theirs, and the workshop had a rule about knocking within the month. The workshop was built in the valley between the 2 camps, on the trampled strip, entirely deliberately. It had a demon roof and imperial foundations, because that was what was available, and everybody said it looked like 2 buildings arguing. Rowan designed all of it, and lifted none of it. He learned within a month what it is to reach for a tool and have to say the words instead. He was not gracious about it for the first 3 weeks, and Pim let him be ungracious and did not once take it personally. Then it got better, though not because his hands came back, because they did not. It got better because he found that describing a seam to somebody who can already cut it is a different skill. It was a skill he turned out to have, and one that no amount of working alone would ever have taught him. Pim's hands were quick, and had been quick since she was a child in a house where slow hands got noticed. Ilsa's were strong, and could hold a temperature by feel that no forge gauge in either kingdom could measure. Coming out of her armor to work in a linen apron in front of 40 people in the 2nd week, she found that nobody died. Lumi taught the thread work, hovering at eye level, correcting 19 pixies and 4 demons and 1 princess. Coming for a month and staying for a year, Rosalind gave supervising the commission as her official grounds. She spent most of that year learning to weld, badly, and then, slowly and with enormous irritation, learning to weld well. She never did get Rowan into her service. She told him once, late in the evening, that she had ridden 400 miles to conscript a craftsman and had ended up apprenticed in his shed. If he ever repeated that to her sister, she said, she would have him formally removed from the empire. The first thing the workshop made was harness thread. The second was a set of chain anchors for the northern border, 40 of them, keyed to a demon signature by treaty. That is a sentence which would have started a war 18 months earlier, and which now simply appeared in a supply ledger. The third was a walking frame for a farmer's wife with bad eyes, made for nothing, and it took 11 days. Rowan made Pym build it 4 times before he let it out of the shed. Falk sent his own smiths down to learn, and Emmerich sent 2 of his, and then 6, and stopped pretending it was an exchange program. Arriving one morning, Gustav brought a letter from a stripped duke living on a small allowance in a cold house. Reading it twice, Rowan put it in a drawer and did not answer it that year. He answered it the year after, and what he wrote was shorter than anybody expected. By the second spring, the shed had a second shed, and the second shed had a sign. And Tilda had painted the sign in letters slightly too large for the board. It did not say Ambrose or Kessler or anything at all to do with a house. It said Rowan and Hans, which had begun as a joke at the general's table and had become the name before anybody thought to object. Standing in front of it on the morning they hung it, Rowan put his numb hands in his pockets and counted the people in the yard. There were 61 of them: demons, pixies, imperial smiths, a former adjutant, 2 princesses, and a maid who was nobody's maid anymore. All of them were making things in a valley that had been a battlefield the year before, and none of them had been asked to come. He had been told at 19 by his own father in front of witnesses that his alchemy was useless. It was the single most accurate thing the man had ever said about him. Useless alchemy, it turned out, is the only kind that builds anything, and he had spent 2 years proving it the only way that counts. He went back inside because Pym was calling him, because the thread on the third harness was drawing badly, and somebody with eyes had to say why.